I'm just curious, is there a way to move councilors up to the top of this so I can see them all? Righty, well, we will.
You may want to go ahead and hide all non-video participants, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency for Monday, October 12th to order. If the recorder would please call the roll.
Board Member Kaiser.
Present.
Board Member Andersen.
Likewise.
Board Member Nanke.
Here.
Board Member Leung. Board Member Osick.
Here.
Board Member Hoy.
Here.
Board Member Nordyke.
Present.
Board Member Lewis.
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. Thank you. Councilor Nanke, why don't you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Would be glad to, Mr. Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, Councilor Hoy, do we have any additions or deletions?
No.
Right. I have no one signed up for public comment. So the consent calendar, please.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Second by Kaiser.
And the consent calendar consists of item 3.1A, September 28th, 2020 draft urban renewal agency minutes. Item 3.2A, external borrowing for the Riverfront downtown urban renewal area. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Discussion.
Mayor?
Yes, okay, yeah.
I had a question earlier about what's tax exempt and non-tax exempt bonds out of the 10 million that we're authorizing today. And I asked Robert Barron if he could just give us a short definition of that.
Ms. Rutherford,
Sure.
Where's Mr. Barron? Kristen, do you want to take us through this?
It looks like Bob's about to speak here.
There he is. Okay, sorry.
Tom's inquiry was particularly timely because we identified $2.5 million in the toolbox program that provides up to $300,000 grants. We identified that actually could be moved from the taxable issuance to the non-tax issuance. The term sheet that's going in with the RFP later this month will include that change. But essentially, the purpose for offering a tax exempt at the federal and the state level for the purchaser is to encourage investment in infrastructure that benefits everybody, not just Oregon residents. Those items that are excluded from that, which is now the only remaining amount, is the $2 million for the, what are we calling it now? The transition center, or is that right, Kristen? Or oh, you're muted. Sorry.
It's the Navigation Center.
Navigation Center, sorry. And that has to do with who may be operating that in the future. If it is a public entity or a for-profit entity, we cannot issue tax-exempt bonds on and then turn it over to a for-profit organization. So that's essentially the purpose of the tax-exempt versus the taxable. From our perspective, we have the ability to pay a lower interest rate when we're issuing tax-exempt bonds because the buyer of those bonds not only get the interest rate, but they also get it tax-free. And so it really benefits us to have more of the the dollars on the tax exempt issue.
Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Rutherford, could you give us just a brief summary on what this action, if we approve it tonight, what it'll mean in practical terms for the urban renewal area?
Absolutely. Kristen Rutherford, Urban Development Director. So traditionally, we have done very little long-term bonding in Salem. The last large bond that we've done with urban renewal was for the convention center. Since then, we have been operating our urban renewal areas on a sort of pay-as-we-go through du jour bonds, so short-term borrowings. With the retirement of the convention center debt, we have more long-term debt capacity now that we didn't have up until about a year ago. And by moving forward with this borrowing, it helps us in a couple of ways. We have put a lot of resources out into the community here in the last year with money going to some property acquisition, some large grants, the assisting with homeless issues, and the police station. And by doing this longer term borrowing, this allows us to continue moving forward on key projects, keep the amount of money that we're available to provide out in the community in grants at a higher level than we would be able to if we just did move forward with du jour bonds. So that as we're coming out of COVID and seeing that there may be some need to repurpose larger buildings that we have downtown, this will help with that. It will also allow us to keep moving forward with streetscape and implementing that project.
Councilor Andersen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to go back to what Mr. Barron was talking about, and that is what we are trying to do, as I understand it, by tax exempt bonds is to encourage more investors to invest in the city. And it's not just people who live here, but it's people all across America who say, I want a tax exempt bond. So so we can pay a lower interest because nobody's paying taxes on it. If we paid a higher interest and they weren't tax exempt, it'd really be maybe even a wash for the people who would like to invest because they're going to have to pay taxes themselves. Plus, there's all sorts of more bookkeeping and accounting stuff. So this is a way to encourage investment in our city, not only by people who live here, but by people all across the country. So it's a very good thing.
All right, thank you. I wanted to alert the recorder that Jackie Leung has joined us by phone.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hey, we got any other questions, comments? Would please call the roll.
Board Member Andersen.
Aye.
Board Member Nanke.
Aye.
Board Member Kaiser.
Aye.
Board Member Osick.
Aye.
Board Member Hoy.
Aye.
Board Member Nordyke.
Aye.
Board Member Lewis.
Aye.
Board Member Leung. And this is for the consent calendar, Board Member Leung. Okay, Board Member Leung. Okay, and Chair Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes.
Aye, sorry, I wasn't unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
good,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other business. So I'm going to adjourn the Urban Renewal Agency and call to order the Salem City Council meeting for October 12th. If the, pardon me, the recorder, please call a roll.
Councilor Kaiser.
Present.
Councilor Andersen.
Ditto.
Councilor Nanke.
Here.
Councilor Leung.
Here.
Councilor Osick.
Here.
Councilor Hoy.
Here.
Councilor Nordyke.
Here.
Councilor Lewis.
Here.
Mayor Bennett.
Here. Okay. Councilor Hoy, any additions or deletions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are three, in fact. I move approval of item in addition to item 1.4A, which is a revised staff report. Item 4.BA, which is a new attachment, as well as written testimony received through 3:30 p.m. today. And then a brand new item, 5.C, which is a declaration of a state of emergency related to the Santiam Canyon wildfire response. Also, additional written testimony received through 5 p.m. today relating to 4A and 5B.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor?
I believe we need a second, Mayor.
Second.
Yeah, I thought I saw Anderson look like he was seconding. Sorry, Tom. Okay, go ahead. Call a roll.
Councilor Nordyke,
Aye.
Councilor Lewis,
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser,
Aye.
Councilor Andersen, Councilor Nanke,
Aye.
Councilor Leung,
Aye.
Councilor Ossick,
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay. Move on to council and city manager comments. I'll just have one. I had an opportunity to participate on Saturday in the sort of grand opening of the new police center, a truly beautiful building, highly functional, probably state of the art here in Oregon at this point. It's really quite an outstanding building. And I'm sure there will be additional opportunities for the public to tour the building other than in police custody. So we look forward to that opportunity. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also joined at that ceremony and agree with your comments in terms of it being a state-of-the-art facility, and it'll be a real asset for the city and for many, many, many years. I wanted to focus tonight just for a minute on the pandemic. We're still in the middle of it, folks, and people need to wear their masks. And I'm seeing a lot of folks not wearing masks, and we're never going to get through this thing until we all kind of get on the same page and start wearing our masks, especially when we're in public. It seems like people who are hanging out with people they know feel like they don't need to wear their masks or something like that. I don't know what the philosophy is, but we have got to get our country back, our businesses back open, our schools back open. The only way we're going to do it is if we wear our masks for a while. And nobody likes it. It's not convenient, but it's important. And so I just encourage everybody to be wearing masks when they are in public.
And social distance and wash your hands. I mean, there are actually some very simple things you can do. So thank you, Councilor Hoy. Councilor Andersen?
Just briefly on the police station, I was there too. I agree with everything, and it's an asset to the police themselves, to the city, and also to the citizens. It's an opening and welcoming place for the city to interact with the police. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. There may be some ways you interact with the police that might not be so open and welcoming, but the public facing is. I have two things I want to talk about tonight. The first relates to a personal thing, but I think it relates to every single person on the council. Tonight is my 18th wedding anniversary.
Yay.
And I can think of no better place to spend it than here with all you folks.
Happy anniversary.
Really? Is that true? I mean,
but it brings to mind the great sacrifices. No, I'm not talking about the sacrifices the councilor and the mayor makes. We already know that. But I'm really talking about the sacrifices that our spouses, our partners, our children, anybody who was in our greater family, the sacrifices they make all the time for the public service that we all do. And it's just, it affected me particularly today, because normally this is not how we would be spending an anniversary, but I have an obligation, and I'm sure this sort of thing has happened to every single person on the council, that your family in some way has had to make huge sacrifices for our public service. And I just want to thank Jessica, my wife, and in absentia, I want to thank every single person who makes the same sacrifices for the councilors and the mayor. Now I have a slightly more, I don't know, serious, well, that was serious, but more serious side. I haven't spoken about this too much lately, but we now have had 2 more car deaths in the city. Both of them were bicyclists. Each of them was in a place where they should be. The first one was Jolene Brash Berry, She's 26 years old. She worked at the Book Bend downtown. She was riding her bike in a bike lane where she should be. She got hit by a drunk driver. Second one was a gentleman named Othel Polson, who was 70 years old on Windsor Island Road, riding his bicycle over the noontime. And this hits me too, because I ride my bike on Windsor Island Road all the time. It's a way to get out of town. And my next birthday, I'll be 70, the same age as Mr. Polson. So I say this all the time, but when we have one situation like this, it's an accident. But we have had 34 bike, pedestrian, or skateboard deaths since 2015. That's a horrible record. And it's not an accident, it's a systemic problem. And more often than not, the fault lies with the drivers, not with the people who are the drivers who kill the people. And to me, this just emphasizes even more, we need separated bike lanes, not bike lanes that are painted onto the streets. And I would encourage Public Works in the future, and I know I've talked about this at McGilchrist, the work we're doing on McGilchrist. Yes, we want bike lanes, but they need to be physically separated from the cars. An example I can give of one way to do that is that you look at High Street when you're going south from downtown, from the courthouse there, toward the parking garage and Safe and toward Bush's Park. Till you get to, I think it's Cottage, it's cars, bike lane, it's parked cars, bike lane, cars. And once you cross, I don't know the street there, Bellevue maybe, once you cross that street, it becomes bike lane, parked cars, driving cars. And that seems to be an easy way to separate things. And so I would just encourage our Public Works Department in all aspects of street designs, when they're putting a bike lane in, make it separated from the street. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Indigenous Peoples Day. As you may know, Indigenous Peoples Day is a holiday that celebrates and honors our Native American peoples across this country. As many of you may know, we have a number of tribes in Oregon. According to OPB, about 60 tribes have lived in Oregon, and we have 9 federally recognized tribes. I highly recommend that you check out information about our tribes on the Oregon Historical Society website and the Tribe Zone website to learn more about their heritage and how to celebrate today. Moving on to the Salem Police Department, I too was present for the event this weekend. And one of the things that really struck me about this facility is the improved meeting space for victims and victims advocates. This meeting space is extremely important. As someone who's handled child sex abuse cases and other cases involving domestic violence and other sex crimes, I handled those cases for about 6 years at the Department of Justice. And I know how important it is for children and survivors to have a space where they can safely share their stories. And so the improved meeting space that this building provides will help people feel comfortable sharing their stories and help bring perpetrators to justice. So I was very pleased to see that. 2 other points I'd like to make. Wildfire evacuation efforts. As you know, for many people, their homes are gone, and so the rebuilding process will take quite a bit of time. I have posted on my Salem City Councilor Vanessa Nordyke Facebook page a video on how to work with insurance carriers to request reimbursement if you've had property that was damaged or destroyed by fire, how to request living expenses and other things while you're waiting for your home to be rebuilt. So we just want to put that information out there for anyone who's interested. Next, I will be having my monthly meeting with my constituents, Go Ward 7. And on my Facebook page, if you go to the events tab, you can get the Zoom link for our October monthly meeting. Last but not least, today I toured the new Union Gospel Mission facility, which is in the works. And what an impressive organization and what an impressive facility that is. I saw a lot of construction workers hard at work there. the UGM folks told me that 3 of their construction workers are actually folks who have been guests and users of those homeless services. So not only are they benefiting from the services, but they're learning construction skills, which they can take with them to other construction work sites after the UGM building is completed. This will double their capacity and will include services to help people get back on their feet, not only for education, careers, but also mental health services, which are sorely needed for persons experiencing homelessness, especially folks who've been on the streets for a long time. I'm working behind the scenes with Gretchen Bennett and other community partners to help identify shelter options because winter is coming. And if you are interested in participating in the city's car camping program that my colleague, Councilor Chris Hoy, came up with, please contact the city if you're interested in participating as a private landowner in our car camping program. So those are my updates. Thank you.
Councilor, one more time, your the address of your website. I think.
Oh, sure. So it's a Facebook page, Salem City Councilor Vanessa Nordyke. I post regularly there, and that's where you can find the Zoom link for our monthly meetings.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilor Hoy?
Mr. Mayor, just one other quick note. Since we're talking about sacrifices and celebrations, I believe that it may be the birthday of a certain councilor from Ward 1 today. So happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
To you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Carol. Happy birthday to
you. Wow, thank you.
Wow, there you go.
Yes, this is how I spend my birthday, is attending city council.
The dream come true.
It's all good. Yeah.
It is. It is. Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, speaking of which, I was actually a guest counselor for the second time in a year, 20 years ago, on my birthday, when we were doing annexation hearings. So there is a lot of sacrifice, both personally and especially for our families. Just wanted to comment on the police facility. Truly a quality construction project. The laboratory facilities are exquisite. What really struck me was they actually had a room with a tag on it for the toy storage, for where they collect toys to distribute out to the community. And then because I did not bring it for a photo op, I'll put it up here now. This is from May 17th, 2017, when the bond measure passed. And you can see, the mayor, the police chief, and here's Councilor Nanke hiding kind of in the background there. So I keep things, I'm starting to purge them. I'll take a picture of it and hook it. But we toured it on Thursday, and then we're there on for the ribbon cutting on Saturday. And I encourage staff to reach out to the neighbors who watched the construction of that facility from day one, to make sure that those who are interested could be able to walk through the building and see what their neighbor is.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. Councilor Kaiser?
Thank you. I also joined the opening of the police station on Saturday and got a chance to tour it. And it's nice to be able to see it come together over the course of my term on council. I think it was within the first quarter of the 2017, we got language for the bond measure. So from that point all the way now to our police employees moving in is quite satisfying, just to see that project come to completion over 4 years. My favorite part about that facility, for all its high-tech things and it's going to serve us for a long time, is the community room. And it's really, it's a practical thing. There's not a whole lot of places to meet kind of in the downtown area that are large kind of community meeting spaces, especially that are city owned. So I think that's really good. But the real reason is because of the issues going on right now with police and the relationship with our police force with the community. I think that community room is going to serve us well so that we can have a place to meet to talk about some of these really difficult issues. And we can have a place that's on city property and we're right there. We don't have to try to go find alternative spaces or spaces that are big enough to accommodate people when we can safely gather. Unfortunately, we're not there yet to be able to do that. But I think that space is just going to be such an asset, not just to folks who live downtown and live near downtown, but for the whole community. And to have it there, I think is really important as well. I also want to echo on to what Councilor Hoy said about wearing masks. We are still very much in the pandemic. I was actually downtown today to, my husband and I were trying to eat lunch to celebrate a little birthday thing. And it was difficult because there were people downtown and they're doing the same thing we were. And because restaurants are limited with how many people they can seat, I think we went to 4 different places to try to find a place to eat. And I know they would love to take more customers. They just can't because we have restrictions, because we are in the middle of a pandemic, because it's not under control yet. And I know our businesses are really suffering because of that. They could do more business, but they simply can't. And so we really need to do our part. And it's so easy to wear a mask. And I understand if it's, you know, it's difficult and you can't breathe easily or whatever the reasons are, but you just have to do it if you're going to be around other people outside of your household. So it's the simplest thing. And then yes, washing your hand and keeping distance, but we've all got to do our part to get out of this, or else we will continue to be doing this on my next birthday. And I don't want that to be the case. So just wanted to echo those comments.
Hear, hear. Councilor Lewis?
Sure, I just want to comment. I too was at the open house on Saturday. 2 things that came out is it's so wonderful to be able to have all of the police facility in one location now, rather than spread out all through the city. And secondly, I want to give a personal shout out to Chief Moore. As he mentioned in his talk Saturday, it's kind of bittersweet for him. He spent his entire career supporting and protecting the city of Salem, and he gets to spend about 10 minutes in the chief's office. So I think he deserves a great deal of credit.
Yes. All right, anyone else? I'm sorry, Mr. Powers.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to reinforce the points that have been made this evening regarding masks. The Oregon Health Authority has reported so far in October, the average number of cases is more than the peak in July. So the importance of masks remains. To my city colleagues who are on this meeting, who are watching from home, please mask up. We're in a fishbowl. We need to lead by example. As counselors have said, we're all in this together. So we need to continue to be diligent in wearing masks, social distancing, practicing good hygiene. On the police station, Chief Moore, all the city employees that were involved and the contractors really did appreciate the opportunity to show council and the people involved who helped get the police station from idea to reality to show off the station. And we certainly are eager when we can to share the building, share the station with the community, because it really is, well, designed and built for our police officers. It really is a community asset, and we look forward to being able to share the tour opportunities in the community room with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on then to proclamations. I'm just pulling out here. I had a request from Susanna Escobedo, Marion County Victim Assistance Director, Paige Clarkson, Marion County Deputy District Attorney, and Jane Downing, Director of the Center for Hope and Safety for a Domestic Violence Awareness Month proclamation. I wanted to share that with you. Whereas the impact of domestic violence extends beyond individuals, reaching into families and communities, and whereas in the last year, Marion County has experienced 3 domestic violence homicide crimes resulting in the deaths of 4 victims. And whereas the Marion County District Attorney's Office received 1,126 law enforcement reports of domestic violence last year and filed 989 domestic violence cases. And whereas the Marion County courts received 1,128 requests for protective orders last year. And whereas the Center for Hope and Safety received 33,189 contacts to its program in 2019 and provided 4,866 nights of shelter. And whereas the Marion County Victim Assistance Division provided 20,737 victim services and assisted 1,728 victims of domestic violence last year, walking alongside them and giving them a voice in the criminal justice process. And whereas we know that we can make a difference by speaking up and reaching out to help victims and survivors, then now, therefore, I, Chuck Bennett, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim October 2020 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and honor those who have died and acknowledge those who have survived by supporting meaningful services that create safety and hope for people needing help in our community, dated this 12th day of October. Okay. We now have a presentation, our 2020 Community Satisfaction Survey. So, Mr. Manager, I'll let you kind of lead the way on this.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, we're joined by John Horvick from DHM. DHM is the firm we've used for the past 5 years, to conduct our annual resident community satisfaction survey. And John is with us to share with you the findings from the survey and to also provide some context, state and national context for some of the questions. So please, John.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here once again to serve Salem. And if I can add on to some of the comments we were saying earlier, thank you all for your service. I'm grateful for it. I only have, I believe, about 5 minutes, and so I'm going to try to highlight what I think are some of the key findings and want to bring your attention to. I have 4 sort of major points that I want to make. And quickly, all the methodological details are in the full report, but just to remind folks, this is a survey of Salem residents ages 18 plus. We conducted it from September 1st to the 19th. Normally, we wouldn't be in the field for a survey for that long, but there were some major events. With the wildfires, we did pause for about a week to not be bothering folks during that time. Sample size of 400 people, 4.9% margin of error. The survey is available in both English and in Spanish. So those are some of the mechanics. I'm happy to answer questions after I go through some of the key numbers. If you have read the report, you may be coming away with some mixed feelings. And I do want to sort of lean into the positive numbers that we see in the report. First of all, we've been asking this broad question if you're satisfied or not with city services, and the number has consistently been above 80%, and this year was 86%. 86% satisfaction level on anything, on any survey that we do is just really remarkably high. The reason you may have some mixed feelings about it is that it's down a bit from 2016 and years prior, or in the year since then. I believe it was 92-ish% in 2016, and it has come down a little bit. And to be honest with you, that was totally expected. Not because people might not be as satisfied, but when you're at 92%, you got nowhere to go. You really were at the ceiling. And so there's just going to be some natural erosion, I think, when you're at a level of 92%. 86% is a great number that you should celebrate. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is that the kind of question that firms like ours, DHM and other polling firms, benchmark across time and across communities so frequently is that classic, are things headed in the right direction? Or are they off on the wrong track? And you'll note that the right direction number this year was 38%. That's a tick or 2, 3 above where it was last year. Historically, 38% is not a great number. It's not a great number whether you're talking about a city, a county, the state, or the country. But it's important to you to view that number in some context. One piece of context is that there's been a decline in positive feelings just broadly, and so through COVID. And as an example, DHM does monthly statewide surveys. In April of 2020, 51% of Oregonians said that the state was headed in the right direction. It fell every month until September, and it was 31% in September. So that same sort of time period that we're talking about for the Salem survey. And, with the economic recession and with COVID, it's not a surprise that people would be feeling frustrated. We did ask a follow-up question, is if you said that the survey community is heading in the wrong direction or off on the wrong track or heading in the right direction, is it mostly because of things outside the city's control or things that the city has control over? About 2/3 of people who said that the city's heading on the wrong track said it was issues outside the city's control. So it's a number you want to see increase in the coming years, for sure. It's not where you want to be, but that context of where it sort of fits into the state, and that a large number of people are saying that it has to do with issues outside of the city. The third point I want to make is that, and it relates to the right direction, wrong track number, we have seen communities feel less satisfied in their community over the last 5 or 6 years at about the same rate and speed as concerns about homelessness have risen. And if you see the chart in the report, that concern about homelessness just is almost at a 45-degree angle. So that question that I'm calling out is an open-ended question. We ask, what's the most important issue in the community? People can say anything that they want. So it's not given a list. We don't prompt them with anything. They can say whatever they want. And 49% of Salem residents this year said homelessness is their number one. That's a pattern that we've been seeing across the state, particularly the I-5 corridor and the coast. So those are the two areas at the Portland metro area as well. But just as a comparison for you, we did a survey in Eugene in June, asked the same question, and 44% of Eugene residents said homelessness was their most important concern as well. This is clearly an issue that many communities are struggling with, and we see it here again in Salem as well. And then we asked, I don't have the question in front of me, I don't know, there may be 50, 60 questions in the survey. We asked about a whole bunch of services. You mentioned police quite a bit in your conversation before I joined, and I do want to call out the police specifically in terms of satisfaction for two reasons. One is that in previous years, we asked about satisfaction of sort of public safety and emergency services as a group. So including police and fire and others, 911 services collectively. This year we separated out police, largely because of the broader context in which the survey was being fielded in, right? There's been lots of protests and sort of a national movement to reevaluate policing. In national studies, confidence in the police is at its lowest level. So in Gallup studies, I think 44% of Americans-ish, I don't have the number in front of me, say that they're confident in their police, which is an historic low in their surveys. So we are in a moment where people are feeling less confident in their police. We asked the question differently in the survey. We asked about satisfaction with the service, but 72% of Salem residents are satisfied with the police, one of the higher rating services that we did ask about. So, that's important to know, that a little bit lower than services overall, but it's still a pretty good number. There are differences, though, by race that I think are important for you to know. 77% of white Salem residents said that they're satisfied with the police. 54% of residents of color said the same. So a majority of residents of color said that they were satisfied, but that gap between whites and those of color is 20 plus points, and something to note and pay attention to and to consider as you move forward. So those are the 4 points I want to make at the time that I have. Whatever time you want to use, I'm happy to stay and try to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, thanks, John. The one thing that kind of struck me, and it was mentioned in the survey too, was that just about 90% of residents believe that it's the residents in Salem that need to make people feel welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And you pointed that out as an opportunity for action. Could you maybe explain that a little bit more?
Well, there's just that gap. I mean, it's when you think about perhaps the survey also asked about communications, and leaning into that, leaning into people's expectations and maybe hopes for themselves about what they might be asked to do is important. I think it's sort of as a measure too, where people think that their responsibility is. And so perhaps sort of when you think about asking the city or city leaders to do something, asking individuals to do something, there may be sort of learnings there as well. Those are some of the sort of big things that come to my mind, really sort of how you lead into communications, what you're asking people. And I think you can tell this positive story about that residents want to be doing this, and they see themselves as good actors in that. But there is a gap too in between who's responsible and so how people are feeling in some respects.
Councilor Andersen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much for this survey. I have a question on homelessness along the same lines as when you said 40% said we were heading in the right direction, which meant 60% didn't. And you said of that 60%, 2/3 of it said we were heading in the wrong directions for things beyond our control.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got the same issue with homelessness. I wonder if you ask that kind of question. So are people saying, we've got an issue with homelessness, it is broader than the city and it's beyond our control, or is it we've got an issue with homelessness that the city by itself is making worse?
Right. Those are really great, important questions. They're not questions that we specifically asked in the survey, but if I can provide some broader context, which I think is relevant. And it could be different in Salem, what I'm going to say, but these are sort of the numbers what we're seeing. When we ask Oregonians, or I've asked it more in the Portland metro area, do you think that homelessness is a problem we can solve, or is it intractable? The language is a little bit different, but that's the gist of it. More people will say that we can solve it, but about 4 out of 10 folks will tell us it's intractable. Now, if you believe that that's true or not, it's not my place to say, but you probably are dealing with a community where some large segment of the people do feel like it can't be solved. The reasons that they're likely to say that it can't be solved is because when we ask people what are the main causes of homelessness, the two that always stand out are mental health and drug addiction. Now, both those can be ameliorated with public policy and with good community programs, et cetera, but they're personal. They're characteristics or behaviors of the individual. I mention that because what tends to be a little bit lower is access to housing that's affordable. Again, that's something that can be addressed with policy, and I think folks who advocate around homelessness issues say that that's homelessness is a housing affordability problem. But the typical person in Oregon is more likely to say it has something to do with the personal characteristic, and a high number of people say it can't be addressed. Those are problems I think that you have to wrestle with, or challenges as a council. I don't have the great solution other than to say, the community's probably not, will recognize it broadly that's a problem, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to rally around the same solutions or think that the root causes are the same.
Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Nordyke.
I just wanted to call out what it says here about the overall satisfaction rate, because there are some unsung heroes that really deserve the credit for that. Survey says opinion of city services in general remains overwhelmingly positive, with 9 in 10 residents saying they are satisfied. Many specific services continue to receive high ratings, especially basic services such as fire and emergency, parks, street lighting, water and wastewater, and so on. And I just want to call that out because the vast majority of city staff will never receive recognition for the work that they do. And I've had one of the city department heads told me a couple of weeks ago that, we're doing our best work when we are essentially invisible. When all the street lights work, when all the parks are clean, when all the sidewalks are free of debris. You know, I mean, sometimes government works best when it is invisible. And we've got a lot of rank and file employees who don't want recognition. They don't want to step forward. They just want to do their job and go home to their families at the end of the night. And I want to say thank you to all those hundreds of city employees out there who help our city run smoothly. So thank you for all of that.
Well, if I can just say I agree with everything you just said. And from a public opinion and communication standpoint, I've done hundreds of focus groups across the state. So frequently, people assume when they hear about something for the first time, it's because leaders have failed. And and they also frequently don't know who's responsible for what. Part of the reason for that is because we don't tell the positive stories frequently enough, loud enough. And so when you have things to celebrate, tell them, because voters need to know that things are going well, so that they're going to feel better when there are challenges.
Good advice. Anyone else? Yes, Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. The first is, curious how the recent wildfires impacted your data collection. And I saw in the report that you suspended it for a few days, but I have to think that that's going to affect people viscerally, just because it was an event that lasted for so long, just the effects, the physical effects of it. That's the first question. Just more of a information about kind of how you dealt with that. And then the second question was, when you asked the question about, do you feel the city's headed in the right or wrong direction? I'm curious as to what kind of follow-up questions are asked, and if we can get at any kind of qualitative responses, because I would be really interested if we know specifics about why, because it's such a general question, and I don't know kind of the follow-up questions that are asked, or if there's a way of getting at that rather than just a yes or a no.
Let me take those in order. So first on the effect of the wildfires, the survey went in the field on September 1st. So it was in the field from September. I believe the wildfires started the 8th. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's right, or within a day or so. And so the vast majority of the data were collected before the fire started. Then we paused until the 15th, I believe, or through the 15th. And then, so the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 4 more days in the field, we were out of schedule. And this is the busiest time in a 4-year cycle for call centers to be doing surveys like this. And so we just got a little bit of time each night. And so most of the survey was done before the fires, a little bit done afterwards. And it just took a few days because we just didn't have the hours reserved at that point. So I don't think it had a big effect, I guess is the bottom line. It probably had some, but I don't think you need to interpret the results really through that lens, is what I guess I would say. With regards to right direction, wrong track, it's kind of a funny question because usually we try to be parallel or, similar on one side, agree, disagree, support, or oppose. But this is, and right direction, wrong track aren't necessarily like that. But this is a question pollsters have been asking for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. And so it's just such a clear benchmark. The way that we dealt with it in this survey was unique to me, but I really did like the way it was asked. They use it, primarily issues with the city or things outside of its control. That tells you at least directionally how people are feeling, but doesn't tell you the specifics. And so the ways to get at that, one is to ask an open-ended question, why do you feel that way? So if you say right direction, what's the primary reason, or wrong track, same thing. And the other is a qualitative researcher in addition to a survey researcher. Some of this is just really best addressed with, deep conversation with your community members. That can be community meetings, but it can also be randomly selected participants for focus groups to just dig deeper into why they're feeling the way they are. But the open-ended question is the, pretty standard way. The way you did it was new to me, or the way we did it here was new to me, but I really did like it, and I think it's pretty insightful.
Anyone else? Thank you very much, Mr. Harvick. This is annually something we look forward to. It's very helpful as we head into our strategic planning. Certainly a lot of things for us to think about and try to figure out how best to turn turn the curve, I guess. Really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
It was always great to work with the City of Salem. And of course, if you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One question, just real quickly. Are the crosstabs on some of these questions available to kind of get a look inside of the demographics and some of the other things going on here?
Absolutely. In the report, we try to call out what stands out, either statistically speaking or relevant to your community. But the full crosstabs are available, and Courtney should have them. If for any reason you're missing them, Courtney, let me know, and I'll make sure I get them to you, and you can distribute them appropriately.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to public comment. I only have one person signed up, Steve Andersen.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Steve Andersen, Ward 8. The story is told of several ranchers grazing their animals on a common field. When the field is not over capacity, the ranchers may graze their animals with few limitations. The rational rancher will seek to add livestock, thereby increasing his profit, thinking logically but not collectively, thus reaping the benefits alone but passing the costs on to all. The tragedy is that ultimately each rancher thinking of only themselves adds more and more livestock, resulting in overgrazing. No one rancher is able to graze the field after it's overgrazed. This is known as the tragedy of commons, a bedrock principle in modern ecology made popular by Garrett Hardin in 1968. The tragedy is being individuals acted independently according to their old self-interest, behaving contrary to the best interests of the whole group, depending and deleting some of the common resources available. I believe Councilor Andersen's motion is a positive step forward, establishing vision and measurable goals for our air quality. 30-plus years of doing risk analysis to determine impacts of toxic air pollutants on the quality of airsheds and human health around the world leads me to the question is, where is the visionary leadership today? City Council is being asked to link arms, roll up your sleeves, and set a course for preserving the commons before it is ecologically a disaster. When I prepare to go on a whitewater river trip, I pull up my maps, I go to my bookshelf, I pull off my copy of Snoggy Seekers, get that one right, and assemble information on river conditions. Why? I want to establish a vision of where I'm going and what is going to be needed to get there. Experience has taught me that river changes in conditions from time to time, and you have to scout certain rapids. But without this vision and preparation, where I'm going, there can be no successful whitewater river trip. Councilor Andersen's motion to set measurable greenhouse gas emission goals is the vision needed to preserve our air quality, the commons. He knows, as do all of you, that experts will be called to run scenarios on how this can be done, and that our community will have input. However, if council does not define the vision, it's like the Cheshire cat in the tree. One day, Alice came to a fork in the road and saw a Cheshire cat in the tree. "Which road do I take?" asked Alice. "Where do you want to go?" was his response. "I don't much care," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. Please support Councilor Andersen's motion. Get somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Andersen? Okay, very good. Thank you. Consent calendar. Councilor Hoy?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the consent calendar with the following exceptions. Item 3.3A pulled by Councilor Leung, and item 3.3B pulled by Councilor Nordyke.
Second.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. That leaves us with 3.1A, the September 21st, 2020 draft council work session minutes. 3.1B, September 23rd, 2020 draft joint city council and Salem Planning Commission work session minutes. Item 3.1C, September 28th, 2020 draft city council minutes. Item 3.3C, annual evaluation of the City of Salem floodplain management plan. Item 3.3D, intergovernmental agreement with the Western Oregon University for optical fiber network. Item 3.3E, intergovernmental agreement with the Housing Authority of the City of Salem for administrative services. Item 3.3F, ratification of the intergovernmental agreement with the State of Oregon Military Department Office of Emergency Management. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Great, thank you. Any comments, discussion on this? Hey, if the recorder would please Call the vote.
Councilor Lewis,
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser,
Aye.
Councilor Andersen,
Aye.
Councilor Nanke. Pardon me?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilor Leung,
Aye.
Councilor Osick,
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Nordijk,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We'll move on to our public hearings. We'll start with 4A.
The City Council will now conduct a public hearing for the purpose of receiving public testimony regarding proposed fees and charges for utility service rates. The hearing will begin with a staff presentation. Individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes.
Are you ready for me, Mayor?
I am ready for you, Mr. Fernandez.
Thank you. I will share my screen if I may. And put this on presentation mode. All right. Everybody can see the presentation mode, I assume?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I am Peter Fernandez, Public Works Director. Tonight, I am pleased to present our biannual utility rate proposal. My presentation is a summary of the financial analysis work that supports our recommendation, the details of which are included in the staff report and its attachments. Alicia Blaylock and our financial consultant, Deb Gallardi, who are on the call this evening, were the lead staff in preparing the analysis. I want to thank them and the rest of our analyst staff for their work on this effort. I also want to thank the members of the Water Wastewater Task Force. I appreciate their thoughtful review, consideration, and recommendation of our proposal. Tonight's presentation will cover our outreach efforts, recommendation, development process, and a summary of how the proposed rate changes affect customer bills. We started our public outreach process by convening the Water Wastewater Task Force, who met twice this summer. Their meetings were noticed and open to the public for viewing and comment. The task force recommends the rate proposal. Notice of the proposal and this public hearing were mailed to all 41,000 in-city utility customers. We also published a website that provided additional information, analysis documentation, a bill calculator, and a link for comments. 2 neighborhood associations invited us to present the rate proposal at their meetings, and the Statesman Journal published a front-page article. Written comments received to date have been provided to Council. Staff is following up with customers who had specific questions about their accounts or requested assistance in paying their bill. Our recommended revenue slope increase for 2021 and 2022 is 3% for water and wastewater and 5% for stormwater. The proposal is consistent with our rate presentations over the past decade and with the updated cost of service analysis Council adopted 2 years ago. The proposal is the smallest possible rate increase that prudently meets the financial needs of the utility. The next few slides provide an overview of how we prepared our proposal. In 2016, Council updated policy C14 to formalize our practice of adopting new rates on a biennial basis. Council also established a quadrennial cost of service update requirement. Consistent with the policy, the proposal before you represents the updated financial plan for the utility and the new rates. The cost of service analysis was updated in 2018 and will be updated again in 2022. The factors affecting the rate proposal are summarized here. Key among them are the need for sustained capital investment and the proper management of operating expenses. We operate the utility in the most economical way possible. For example, we are now producing virtually all of the electricity required to operate Willow Lake, resulting in an estimated annual savings of almost $200,000. To achieve that savings, however, we had to invest $10 million in our new cogeneration engine. All utility capital projects are the result of needed rehabilitation and restoration throughout the system, including upgrades to mains, pump stations, and reservoirs. Capital improvements are also required to address issues of resiliency, watershed degradation, and community growth. For almost a decade, Council has maintained the philosophy of small, consistent annual rate increases. Beyond allowing staff to properly operate the utility and plan for needed projects, this philosophy has helped us address the recent cyanotoxin and COVID-19 emergencies. In each of these cases, Council authorized substantial expenditures without the need for emergency rate increases. In addition, funding received from the state in support of our water system upgrades was facilitated by our record of rate management and our ability to pay for a substantial portion of our capital projects. 4 goals led the development of our rate proposal. First, maintaining a 120-day reserve, an industry standard that provides 3 months of operating funds in case of emergency. Second, maintaining required debt reserves and ratios. Third, continuing to increase cash-funded capital transfers to our target of $34 million per year, or about 1% of our infrastructure valuation. And fourth, maintaining an unrestricted fund balance of $10 million. As the next 2 slides illustrate, the rate proposal meets 3 of the 4 goals. This table is a snapshot of the utility financial model for the rate proposal period, as well as a 5-year planning horizon through fiscal year 26-27. A closer look at the table shows the following. First, our proposed rate increases and our anticipated increases over the planning horizon. Second, our philosophy of managing our expenses both for the proposal period and the planning period. Note that anticipated expense increases range between 3 and 4% per year. Third, working toward our goal of $34 million per year in cash-funded capital transfers. The last row is an indicator of whether expenses will outpace revenue. The model shows that we will be slightly overspending over the next 4 years, but improving in the out years. And I want to emphasize that in the proposal periods, you see at the bottom, we'll be spending between 3.7 and then 2.4% over anticipated revenues. What this indicates is that our rates are lower than they would be if we were showing increase ratios in the 90%, for example, then it would show that we were taking in more money than we were spending. The remainder of the financial plan shows that we maintain our 120-day operating and debt reserves. However, the model shows that we underfund our unrestricted fund balance, especially in fiscal years 23 and 24, where we virtually run the amount to zero, but we recover by fiscal year 27. This is due to increased capital spending and limited rate increases to the promised revenue slope. And the last line of the table shows that we exceed our debt coverage ratios, this is a good thing, by a significant amount because we continue to limit borrowing, preferring to use cash for the needed capital improvements. To provide council with an understanding of what the proposed rates mean to customers, we prepared a series of sample bills. These were created for all of our customer classes inside and outside the city limits. In the following slides, however, I only present illustrations for the inside city customers. The sample bills provide a lot of information that show the assumptions upon which they were created. The top example in this slide shows the average single-family home customer. The other two show a low and high water user respectively. The estimated increases to monthly bills range from $2 to $5. The average single-family home customer will see a $3 per month increase in their bill. This table illustrates how Salem's average single-family utility bill compares to similar Northwest cities. As you can see, Salem's existing and proposed utility bill will place us below all comparable cities except Corvallis, Eugene, and Kaiser. The chart on the right illustrates how the proposed monthly utility bill affects household budgets. The American Water Works Association recommends that utility bills not exceed 3% of median household income. Salem's proposed utility bill will be at about 2%. The left side of the slide summarizes our 2 assistance programs. The Utility Rate Relief Program provides $19.80 per month discount to qualified low-income customers. 576 customers are currently enrolled in the program. The program provides a fixed discount amount that covers the wastewater base rate, street light, and operations fees. Staff recommends changing the wastewater portion of the discount to a percentage of the wastewater base fee to allow the discount to keep pace with future rate increases. The recommended change is included in the proposed resolution attached to the staff report. The Emergency Assistance Program is funded by donations and matched by annual rate revenue transfers. It helps customers who are experiencing a short-term need for payment assistance. Qualified households receive up to $500 of assistance during a 12-month cycle. Over the past 16 months, 482 families have been helped by this program. Council will recall that this was the program that was increased due to the COVID issues back in April. Moving on to other customer classes, here is multifamily. There are many types of multifamily developments in the community. The three examples here illustrate a fourplex, a 300-unit apartment complex, and a mobile home park. The proposed increases are shown here. The commercial customer class includes many different types of uses as listed at the top of the slide. The impacts to two example customers, one with a large parking lot, one with a small lot, are shown here. Here are the examples for industrial customers. The slightly smaller percent increase as compared to the other customer classes is indicative of how stormwater charges are significantly less than water and sewer charges for industrial customers. As a percent of their bill, stormwater is much lower for this customer class. The institutional customer class includes the prisons. The impacts here are similar to the industrial customer class. The public customer class includes all the government agency accounts. The irrigation customer classification, as the name suggests, are water-only customers. In closing, I am delighted to report that the utility fund is in excellent shape. We have worked hard to manage the utilities expenses, and I appreciate council's support of maintaining small, predictable annual rate increases. Because of this, we have been able to address the needs of the community within our existing budgets, even during times of crisis. Salem's is a large, complex, and old utility that requires continuous maintenance and capital improvements. The recommended rate provides the funding to continue to make needed improvements. Given these continuing needs, adopting less than the proposed rates will require larger rate increases in the future. Beyond the day-to-day needs, we have weathered two recent emergencies, and we anticipate more issues in the aftermath of the Santiam Canyon fires. We are already making investments to address the ones we anticipate in the ozone treatment facility and the ASR wells. Unfortunately, we do not know what else the future may bring. Nevertheless, we will continue to efficiently and effectively manage the utility to meet the needs of the community, provide excellent customer service, and limit the growth in expenditures. Thank you for your attention tonight. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. We'll have public testimony and then give the council an opportunity to ask questions. I have only one person signed up, E.M. Easterly.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, members of the Salem City Council. I'm E.M. Easterly from Ward 8. As each of you well know, I am deeply concerned about matters directed toward the city's use of stormwater-related revenues. Tonight, Council is being asked by staff to affirm a stormwater utility rate fee increase that is 67% higher than the proposed fee increases for water and wastewater utility services. This 5% versus 3% annual increase over the next 5 years is explained as follows. Quote, increase of the stormwater revenue slope, to 5% per year for 5 years to more closely align revenue with the revenue requirements. Yet as I reviewed the staff report and supporting documents, it became glaringly obvious that unlike the information offered to explain and support the water and wastewater fee increases, there is absolutely no evidence offered to support the 5% rather than a 3% stormwater utility fee recommendation. What are the claimed revenue requirements, and why is 5% stormwater utility fee increase reasonable? How does a higher stormwater rate increase support affordable housing in Salem? Transparency is essential when council is being asked to increase public service funding. I therefore ask council to A, reduce the stormwater rate increase to 3% annually, or B, postpone the 3 utility rate increases until staff provides documentation informing and justifying the unexplained stormwater revenue requirements that are needed to support the city's stormwater system utility fee increase.
Thank you, EM. Any questions? All right. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Fernandez? Yes, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 questions, Mr. Fernandez. One is, I'm hoping that you will address the issue that was raised by Mr. Easterly in terms of why is the stormwater fee proposed to be 5% rather than 3% like the other 2. And my other question is, we're in the middle of a pandemic that's had significant economic impact on pretty much everybody. And people are having a difficult time making it financially right now. And we're being asked to consider rate increases. What would the ramifications be if we chose not to increase those rates right now?
Thank you, Councilor. In response to Mr. Easterly's concerns, 2 years ago, we did a cost of service analysis update, and it showed that the stormwater utility was generating less than the amount needed to do its services. So the other 2 utilities were subsidizing that. So 2 years ago, we provided that to council and said, we need to increase stormwater by a higher amount than the others. We need to do 5% for 5 years to be able for stormwater to catch up. We were dismayed to find that there's a lot of new councilors. Stormwater utility is fairly new. It was adopted by council really just a few years ago, and then we implemented it over 4 years. We delayed it because there were economic issues at the time it was adopted, and then we implemented it over 4 years to reduce the impact to businesses that have large parking lots, large roofs. So it really had only been in full implementation just a couple of years when we did the cost of service update and realized that it wasn't paying its own way. So the reason it's 5% is just that. And if you saw it on my table, you see that then there's another 5% increase in the 3rd year, in the 1st year of the planning horizon, to address that issue. 2 years ago, we actually recommended a 2.5% wastewater increase to kind of stem that a little bit. So we had a 3, 2.5, and 5 over 2 years. This year, we just couldn't. We were not able to make that work, given our expenses and our increasing costs. So that's the reason for the difference in the stormwater costs. With regard to the pandemic and what we could do, a few years ago, we don't show it anymore because it really was 8 years ago, 10 years ago, the council actually adopted a 0 rate, a 0 and a 3. What that resulted in, because our costs continue to increase, our capital costs continue to increase, we then had to propose a 6% rate increase for the following biennium. So what it means is at some point we have to propose higher and higher rates because we have a zero-sum game. There's no profit here. These are just the needs that the utility has to address our increasing costs, which for the most part we cannot control, PERS, healthcare, our costs for capital construction and just general the general inflation is not the CPI. It's actually higher in many cases because we use chemicals, we use electricity, other things that just often are higher than the CPI. So that's why we propose the 3%. We try and live within that. We try and do small annual things so that we don't get these rate spikes. We don't put our customers, not only our residential customers, but our industrial customers on a roller coaster. So what would happen? We would probably have to recommend higher rates in the future.
Thank you. A follow-up, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I could. So in just practical terms, so recently we had a water main break out south. I think when I toured Guerin Island a couple of years ago, I was told about the age of our pipes that go from Guerin Island in Staten to the city of Salem. That they're, I can't remember, 90 years old or something or more. And so I guess what I was getting at is, what would the impact be on that maintenance that we have to do to make the water get to people's houses in a safe way? What's the actual impact of that sort of thing if we didn't do this rate increase?
Sure. We would have to cut. The first cut would be to capital projects. So things like relining the pipe that was installed in the mid-1930s, which is estimated to be a $10 million project, which frankly isn't even in the CIP yet because we had to spend $50 million on the ozone facility because of the cyanotoxins, and another $10 million on the well so we're spending $60 million on the island just to address an emergency that showed up a few years ago. So that's $10 million. There are significant capital projects throughout the utility. The CIP has something like $200 million in utility projects over the next 5 years to address these very issues. So if we don't have the rates to continue to invest, the first place where we'd cut would be in these capital projects, because we have to continue to pay the electric bill, we have to continue to maintain the system, we have to continue to address water line breaks when they happen. So the first cut would be to the CIP.
Councilor Andersen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Fernandez, I'm interested in a couple things. The first one is on page 5. Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
I'm listening carefully.
Okay.
There we go.
First one is on page 5, when we talk about emergency assistant and utility rate relief program. The way I kind of read your figures, there were about 900, give or take, users who took advantage, or who we helped through the emergency assistance and the utility rate relief program. My question is, how much of those funds have we used to help those nearly 900 people, and how much is left? And do you think, in fact, we could support higher numbers of people who need that relief?
Yes, Councilor, thank you. We certainly can help a lot more people. A lot of that money, I think we reported to Council the last, if not the last Council meeting, the one before, where people were not applying. We assumed that they were not applying because we were not shutting off accounts. Now that people have been notified and they will start getting their invoices for those amounts due starting in January, we anticipate we'll get more applicants. I think we've spent something like, and Alicia's on the call, but I want to say $30,000 of that $500,000. So we have a lot of money to assist people. We are actively working with the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency. They are actively seeking people that may need help. They are also bringing some of their funds to bear, some other funds that they have. And then we also have worked for years with the Salvation Army and St. Vincent de Paul to qualify people so that then we can help them. So we look forward to helping people.
Well, if I could follow up, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
in light of what Councilor Hoy was talking about, the COVID and the long-term rollout of that, I would completely urge the city staff to get this information out. If you're telling me we've got $500,000 and we spent 6% of it or some way small amount, we need to get that out there, because when you look at the, this is not surprising, but I don't think we had one person say, I'm all in favor of raising my rates. Everyone said, I've got problems. And it's been fixed income, low income, seniors, and now you're added to people who have lost income and have trouble just meeting their rent because of COVID. So we need to let people know of that. And that leads me to kind of a corollary question to Councilor Hoy's question. And I asked this, I spoke with Alicia Blaylock this afternoon and said I was going to talk to her or talk to you tonight about this. You say the fund is in excellent shape, and that's terrific, because I think this, as a city, we've been good stewards of it, and I'd like to continue that. And normally, I understand of the concerns that people have, but I understand the programs you just talked about that could help them, and I also understand we've got to do it the way you're talking about. So my question is, what if we were to delay this increase for 3 months? Say from January 1 to April 1, or from 6 months from January 1 to July 1, and then continue and then make that increase there and then increase it again the following year in 2002. So we delay some of the implementation of this. And that to me would address the issues that we're hearing from people.
All right, so a couple of things, and thank you for your question, Councilor Andersen. So these rates do not take effect till January. So people would not see their first bill with the new rates until February. So we like to do our hearings early to alert people, to alert all of our customers so they can plan for these things. A 3-month delay, we estimate, would cost in the vicinity of $750,000 in delayed revenue. So then it means what it means, but that would be the cost. With respect to alerting people to this availability of funds to help them, I want to address that if I may. Every time our customer service staff get a phone call where somebody says, I'm having trouble, they immediately get referred to the agencies. We have also been scouring all of the emails that were sent to council, and every email where someone said, and we had some people say, we need help, our customer service staff are contacting them to let them know that these programs are available. We don't qualify people. We do that on purpose. We don't want to see people's finances. So we send them to these 3 agencies to get qualified so we can help them. So we are actively letting people know and want to help them.
Do we put any kind of information in the bills that we send out? I know we can make a contribution to folks, but do we put some information saying, if you're having trouble with this, here's the number to call. We have funds available to help you.
I'm going to let Alicia Blaylock comment on that. I am not sure if we have done that. We certainly can do that. I'm not sure if we actually have done that. So let me see if Alicia will come on the call and let us know.
We have done that, and we certainly can do it again. And we certainly can put things in the city's newsletter and other outreach, but we have done it in the bills.
Thank you.
Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Director Fernandez. I've been involved with the wastewater task force for longer than I've actually served on it, and have tracked it from an industrial user's perspective for the last 2.5+ decades. Director Fernandez, his predecessor, Director Gerling, put forth the CIP challenge way back when, which kind of led us into the current rate increase range where we said, let's look at all the capital that's out there. How can we pull this down? Because there were significant rate increases for like a decade that really taxed our community. And, you know, we're close to being able to sustain our infrastructure based on our current rate slope, where we can replace everything in the system over 100 years, and hopefully materials will improve over time to where we can push that out again. But you know, I sat on that meeting where council approved a 0% rate increase because one of the councilors, who was currently chair of the Water Wastewater Task Force, was absent that meeting, and he elected to not have us reconsider that, to show people what would actually happen. And, you know, we can forego some revenue in the short term, but there's really no significant capital improvements we can push off more. We've been pushing some off just because of emergencies that we're facing right now. But slow incremental increases is what I push for the duration of chairing this committee. And that's what the city has been able to do. We've actually been able to cut it below 3% to keep it below inflation several times as well. I know we've all received emails saying we just can't afford this right now. But to forestall that for a short amount of time and then slap them with a double increase down the line makes no sense. And that's why our, you know, satisfaction survey said the water, albeit there's people who still go out and buy bottled water because they don't understand the system and the quality that we bring them. You know, the ozone treatment system coming online next year is a fantastic improvement to water quality, albeit it may change our taste. But we have been able to take care of this system in slow incremental rate increases, and we need to hold that course. And to not do so only will put that burden down the line on them. So I would encourage people to listen to the director and the recommendations from the Water Wastewater Task Force, which is not only Salem representatives, but representatives of all the users out in adjacent municipalities as well as the county. So.
Councilor, thank you so much for your service, being the chair for so many years of the Water Wastewater Task Force. We've really appreciated your service on the task force and becoming so expert on our system over the years. Mayor, if I may, I'm going to pretend that this is the presidential debate and that Councilor Nanke actually asked me a question because I want to say a couple of
you're taking Councilor Nordike's time here.
I don't want to mansplain to Councilor Nordike.
Well, you're really close right now.
Just a couple of quick things, if I may, Mayor. You know, because we have funds, we were able to, to hold off on over $1 million, $1.1 million in revenue. When we did not shut off people and people, you know, we allowed people to not pay their bills because of this issue. We were able to hang on and we have a $1.1 million that we assume we're going to get it back, but that was $1.1 million that we're not going to get back till the end of next year. We were able to recommend to council and council adopt an extra $500,000 in support for people. We were able to go to the state, you and I were talking about it, and say, hey, because of the rate management that we have, because we fund these things, that's why the state gave us the $20 million. That helped the Senate president get us the $20 million. So these are things that we're able to do because we have the funds, because we have these slow rate increases. And I just really wanted to stress that. I will give the council a sneak peek. In 2 weeks, we'll have a staff report where we want to help the Sleepy Hollow Water Association. They're drinking arsenic. They're city residents that are on a private well system. in a system where it's full of arsenic and they have to get off of that. And we're going to bring a staff report to council asking for permission to go to Business Oregon, but we're going to recommend investing $1 million to help City of Salem residents drink clean water. So those are the kinds of things that we can do with these slow rate increases that we could still do them, but we'd have a harder time without these slow, consistent rate increases. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you. I just want to make a few comments about this process. First of all, the options for rate relief and emergency assistance should be promptly marked in utility bills in English and Spanish, and I strongly urge city staff to make that happen when these rate increases go up, assuming there's a vote to that effect on council. Secondly, what I note from your report is that our operating costs are going up, and they're going up by about 4.3% over this year, and you expect it to again rise in between 3 and 4% per year. So having a utility rate increase that is around 3% doesn't sound unreasonable to me. And I would also note that given the report that you've generated, you pointed out that even with the rate increase, our rate is still below that of, let's see, Albany, Beaverton, Gresham, Portland by a mile, Tigard, and Wilsonville. So to me, so long as options continue to be available for folks who are struggling due to the financial toll of this pandemic, I understand our infrastructure is aging and we have pipelines that are decades old. They're not going to continue to work perfectly. You don't have to be a plumber to know that, although I find it probably would be helpful to have that expertise. I appreciate the information and I'm ready to vote.
Great, thank you. Councilor Hoy?
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to suggest if we're going to, it sounds like we're in deliberations and not questions. So we may, last two councilors have kind of made statements. So if we need to either go back to questions or close the public hearing, I think.
Yeah, I understand. Every once in a while, people want to make a comment as well. We'll get there. Don't worry. Mr. Fernandez, I want to just quickly ask you again about your comments relative to the ozone treatment and our legislative success on that. I recall vividly you and I and others sitting down with the Senate President, and I thought the first question asked is, how much do you have in the game? Is that how you found that in terms of being able to work that issue through?
Absolutely. Over the years, as I have gone to the legislature on various issues, the elected officials, the legislative fiscal officers, their first question is always, how much money do you have in the game? And if you say zero, they're going to be very nice and very polite, and they're going to show you the door.
I'm going to do one shameless ad during this, because I think it's worthwhile to councilors that are unfamiliar with it. This book by Frank Malden, Sweet Mountain Water, is a history of our water system. And chapter 12, if you read nothing else, chapter 12 is really helpful. You pointed that out to me. Can you give me a couple of the highlights you pointed out to me in that? And then let me just preface that. I'm one of those idiots who voted for zero during the recession, the worst vote I ever cast, because 2 years later I had to vote for 6% because that's the reality here. But could you talk a little bit about this book and about chapter 12?
Certainly. So Frank Malden was a longtime public works director. He was the gentleman who hired me. He had been, I think he worked for the city for over 20 years in total, first as a utility planner and then assistant director. He passed away last year. And I have, his widow gave me the last box of books. So if anybody wants a book, I'm happy to provide it to you. For many, many years, the Salem City Councils did not increase rates. And Frank talks about this in that chapter 12, and there's other pieces, there's other parts of the book. In fact, in some cases, they reduced rates. And John Guerin, that the island is named after, was the longtime utility before there was a public works department. He was a longtime utility director and would request rates and they just wouldn't come. When rates finally started to come about, and Frank Malden is credited for doing the initial master planning, what we called strategic plans back then. And then the EPA came knocking and said, hey, you got to improve the wastewater treatment plant. There were years, decades of 7, 8, 9, 10% per year rate increases because we had to make all that up. And that's what, and Councilor Nanke remembers this, having worked for SUMCO first and then on the Water Wastewater Task Force. And the community had to swallow that because then EPA was forcing us and DEQ was forcing us to do, you know, $100 million worth of improvements at the wastewater plant that we had never afforded to do, plus all the other improvements that we did. So that's what happens is, you know, you can go with zeros, but then you end up with these spikes. And what we've tried to do and what we've been able to do for the last decade is just a slow and steady 3% so that people can plan for them. They're really just our inflationary costs. They're not CPI, I get that, but there are inflationary costs. And then we try and save and scrimp wherever we can to still be able to do as much capital improvements as we can and pay off the debt so we can do it in cash and not have to borrow.
Great, thank you. Well, if there's no further questions, I'm going to turn, Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in regards to the public comment from E.M. Easterly, in regards to stormwater rates, wanted to pass on that through the Water Wastewater Task Force, and it's not just been for the last 2 years, it's been probably the last 10 plus years that we've seen EPA and DEQ expanding the requirements on stormwater discharge through NPDES permitting.
Keep Councilor Hoy's comment in mind as you're going to hit that question.
Sure. No, it's just that as far as for a...
Isn't that true is often a way to end that.
From a transparency perspective, have we not communicated that well, Director Fernandez? Because I know we've talked about it at the public level and in our meetings to a significant extent, which is one of the reasons why we ultimately broke stormwater out of the wastewater system. One, because it wasn't equitable, and two, because we knew the regulatory structure was moving in that direction and that those costs would in fact increase over time.
Right, and that's why we broke apart stormwater, made its own utility. It used to be part of wastewater, and it became untenable, particularly to the industrial users who were subsidizing the big parking lot customers. In fairness to Mr. Easterly, we did not talk a whole lot of why stormwater was 5% because that decision was made 2 years ago. So we as staff kind of took that for granted, and a lot of folks on the Water Wastewater Task Force remembered that, and so we sort of took it for granted. And you know, I spoke to it in my presentation that it was because of the COSA requirements that we did that. I will certainly remember 2 years from now, because there'll be one more year of 5% to make a bigger deal of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Hoy, would you have a motion?
I think Councilor Leung has had her hand up for a bit.
Councilor Leung?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There you are.
I did have a few questions for Director Fernandez. Have there ever been other options looked at, whether it's like funding from other sources other than continuing to increase the water rates?
Councilor, there was a time when you and I were very, very young, when maybe you weren't even of this world. It's been that long, where the federal government would pay for wastewater treatment and operations. That ended a long, long time ago. And so we are forced, utilities are forced to pay. our ratepayers are forced to pay for everything. So no, there are no other options. I mean, there are loans, there are low interest loans that the federal government and the state government have through the state revolving funds, but there is no free money at all. In fact, Senator Courtney, in his efforts to bring us money for this issue, was the first time that we've had any kind of what I'll call free money to the ratepayers in a long time. I'll tell you one other thing. The DEQ, the Oregon DEQ, is severely underfunded by the legislature. Yet what the legislature does year in and year out is it allows it to increase the fees that it charges to wastewater operators. So we pay fees in excess of $40,000 a year just for the service of DEQ oversight, and that continues to increase. So not only is there no free money, we actually are paying more through these hidden fees that because the state of Oregon doesn't have enough money to fund their own agencies. So yeah, it's all on the ratepayers.
Thank you.
Anything else, Councilor Young? Okay, Councilor Kaiser.
One quick question, Director Fernandez, the $500,000 that we've allocated for utility relief assistance, remind me which fund that came out of?
That's out of Fund 310. That's out of the utility fund.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move we adopt resolution number 2020-44 with exhibit establishing fees and charges for utility service rates, water, wastewater, and stormwater effective January 1st, 2021 and January 1st, 2022.
Second.
Second by Nanke. Want to discuss it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a motion I'm happy to make. It's one that we have to make. I just don't see a reasonable alternative to it. It is only between, I think the average ratepayer will pay, I think it was $3 and some cents per month additional. And that's, that can be a lot of money, but it could be a lot worse if we were to delay this, or there could be some really significant impacts, negative impacts to our water system and our wastewater system if we don't. So I make the motion because it's just the right thing to do, unfortunately.
Anyone else want to comment? Councilor Andersen.
Thank you. I had to unmute myself. I agree with all the reasons that have been stated by various councilors and by Director Fernandez as to why we have to do this. I actually considered whether or not I wanted to move to the latest April 1, and I've come to the conclusion that that's really motion without much of a difference, because we're looking at $9 over 3 months. So I'm gonna support this because I think we have a duty as counselors to be good stewards of the city and the city's resources and infrastructure, not just right now, but all the way into the future. And that's what we're doing. But I would again urge everyone who is having any kind of problems. We've got money. We've got $470,000 just sitting around waiting to be used, which is pretty close to the $750,000 we would save if we delayed it for 3 months. So we've got to get this word out, and people need to know that. And I appreciate the efforts that Public Works are making now. And I would ask them to redouble their efforts and do everything they can so we can help people who need help.
Okay.
COVID crisis has really exacerbated the problem, and we're again to the same thing. That's a problem that's beyond the city, but we've got to deal with it down here. So I will vote for it, but I hope we can certainly help the people in our city who are in need.
Okay, I don't see anyone else. Yes, Councilor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm having a hard time with this because we already had, back in January, the there was an ordinance fee that was given to everybody, and everyone already, as we've been discussing, we're dealing with a COVID-19 situation where a lot of number of folks are relying either on unemployment right now or still looking for a job. People have lost hours. I mean, we're also seeing an increase in our people who are homeless and unsheltered. And what in Salem in particular, who are we seeing in the larger increase of people who are unsheltered? People who are retirees, people who are senior citizens. I'm seeing a lot more folks in the South Salem area, some folks who I see now as regulars. And when I don't see them for a day, it makes me worried because I wonder what happened to them. And I feel like this is not an equitable solution in terms of, I mean, I understand what the situation is in the dire situation with the water and specifically with the aging pipes. But there's a lot of concern in terms of what long-term damage are we going to cause to people who are on those fixed incomes. $12 a year, or let's say it's more than $12 a year on the person, it could change whether or not they could even afford having another meal. I mean, for me, there was a time when I was a single parent where I was like pretty much counting every little coin I had to make ends meet. And I can't imagine what it's going to do to people who are on those really strict income, who have to count every single amount that they earn. I mean, the prices are still going up. So, but their income is not changing. It's still staying straight as what it is. Another thing too, in terms of why people aren't applying for assistance, there was some speculations because maybe some people didn't know or because they didn't feel like it was a dire situation. But some conversations I've had with people, they've mentioned that the mindset is they've never had to apply for assistance before, so why are they going to do it now? And it has probably a bit more to do with pride and other times with shame. So, I mean, that's something else to take in consideration. Some people will never apply even though they know they need it because they think there's other folks out there who need it more than they do. There's also individuals who may or may not be aware of it because I did hear that you were going to be providing it in English and in Spanish, but how about for people who speak other languages? How about people who may or may not get that mailer? I mean, ideally, I believe everybody gets it, but what if there's a household or few that don't get that mailer? And how is that going to harm them in the long run?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I echo Councilor Leung's comment in regards to people's pride and the ability of people to pay, which is always one of the hardest things because you hear a lot of people say, I'm willing to pay more taxes for this thing that the city could do, but those people of fixed incomes aren't able to afford that. The other side of that is because of the health of our utility, and in my conversations with Director Fernandez, there's other communities around the state and around the country that have made significant emergency rate increase to 10, 30, 50+% on the rates that are out there for their stakeholders that we could just not even remotely afford to inflict on those people who are on a fixed income. And so these small rate increases again, you know, I remember when 30 years ago, it was like $25 every other month. And then we went to monthly rates and now I'm up to, you know, $80 every month. So I'm almost tenfold if I wouldn't have been using water conservation measures. But it's a tough thing, but to me, it's also compassionate, knowing that we're taking care of that utility, so we're not going to force this significant burden on people when we run into problems like we had with the cyanotoxins, where we didn't have to do any additional rate increases. And so I'm fully in support of the measure that's there, knowing again that, you know, our entire city and country is under stress right now.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, are we ready to vote? If Amy, would you call the vote?
Yes, Councilor Kaiser.
Aye.
Councilor Andersen.
Aye.
Councilor Nanke,
Aye.
Councilor Leung,
Nay.
Councilor Osick,
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Excuse me.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilor Nordike,
Aye.
Councilor Lewis,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Okay, we're on to our next public hearing.
The City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of reviewing the Planning Commission's decision approving comprehensive plan change, neighborhood plan change, zone change application submitted by ODOT, case number CPC NPC ZC 20-04 for property located in the 2400 blocks of Commercial Street and Liberty Street Northeast. The applicable criteria for the minor comprehensive plan map amendment and neighborhood plan map amendment is SRC Chapter 64.025E2 A through E, and the criteria for the approval of a zone change is SRC Chapter 265.005 E A through G. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. A failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue shall preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will be conducted with staff presentation first, followed by testimony from the following. The applicant is limited to 10 minutes. Other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes. Applicable neighborhood association is limited to 5 minutes, and the applicant's rebuttal is limited to 5 minutes.
Bryce, how many minutes you got, do you think?
I can make it as fast as you need it to be. It's,
Well, let it go
a
for
thorough presentation.
Take a few minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And I'll get my screen shared here. So let me just. Okay, so good evening, Mayor Bennett, members of the City Council, Bryce Bishop with the Planning Division here, and I'm here to present the staff report for the proposed land use action before you this evening. It's a comprehensive plan change, a neighborhood plan change, and a zone change for property that's currently under the ownership of the Oregon Department of Transportation. The application requests a minor comprehensive plan amendment to change the comprehensive plan designation of the property, which is both commercial and multiple family residential, to community service government. It also requests a minor neighborhood plan map amendment to change the neighborhood plan designation of the Highland plan to community service government, along with a zone change to change the zoning of the property from commercial general CG and multiple family residential RM2 to public service. The subject property has been under the ownership of ODOT since the early 1970s, and the site is currently used for ODOT's traffic signal shop facility. And so the ODOT's traffic signal shop facility is responsible with, the deployment and the repair and the storage of signs and traffic signals that are used not only, in the region, but throughout the state. And so if you ever see like a variable message sign on the side of a road indicating to motorists that there might be, delay, or you see the message signs across the highway over the highway, those are the types of signs and signals that are stored, deployed, and maintained at this facility. The application has been requested by ODOT because under the site's existing commercial general zoning and the multifamily residential zoning, the existing traffic signal facility itself is not an allowed use in the zone, and their proposed expansion to meet their evolving operational needs on the site to store more signs outside on the site also does not allow that proposed expansion. So for that reason, ODOT has applied for this application, and it would allow the existing facility to come into conformance and be a permitted use in the zone where the current use is non-conforming, and it would also allow them to expand to the southwest corner of the site to provide additional area for outdoor storage. And the proposal puts the property all under one consistent land use designation rather than being split by two different ones. So in terms of the location of the property, it's located in the Liberty Street Commercial Street couplet, just a little bit south of where Commercial and Liberty merge to become the Salem Parkway. The subject property is identified in orange here on the slide. In terms of land uses in the surrounding area, to the east across Liberty Street, it's really characterized by predominantly single family and multiple family, though there are pockets of office and residential or commercial retail uses rather that are provided along Pine Street. And there is some commercial office property right across the street from the site to the east. To the north and south of the property, to the north, there is predominantly, obviously, commercial services, including a restaurant, medical office, and convenience retail that has been developed. And then south across Hickory Street and further to the south beyond Pine, you see a mixture of, you see more residential uses that come into play, but immediately to the south across from the property across Hickory Street, there is a non-conforming vehicle and RV storage area, and there is a property management company's office. When you go west across Commercial Street, you kind of see a mixture of single family dwellings with motor vehicle repair and, kind of more light industrial kind of warehouse structures, building materials, just, dealers, that type of thing. And then of course, the Willamette River is, on the west, the extreme west. So in terms of the comprehensive plan designation for the subject property, it's both commercial and multiple family. The commercial designation applies to the northern 4 tax lots, which make up the subject property, and the southern 5 tax lots, which make up the subject property, is designated multiple family residential. The multiple family residential comp plan designation and the zoning, RM2 zoning that were established on that southern portion of the site, those were established back in the late 90s as part of a study directed or in response to a periodic review order from the state, the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And the city was tasked in order to bring our comprehensive plan up to compliance with Goal 10 at that time, to look throughout the city and throughout the UGB to identify additional areas that could be where the zoning and the comprehensive plan designation can be changed to multifamily to meet our multifamily land deficit that we still had. We have it today and we still have it, and we had it back then in the late 90s as well. So the 5 tax lots on the southern portion of the property were identified through that study, and it was called the Salem Multiple Family Residential Land Study Process, or SMRFLS. So if you like the Smurfs, it's easy to remember. But it was that SMRFLS process that identified, this property. And there was also 3 properties to the north of the ODOT traffic signal facility that were also initially identified to be converted or to be redesignated for multifamily, but through the SMRFLS process, there were objections from the property owners at that time, and the multifamily designation for the 3 lots that, north of the signal shop facility up to where Salem Parkway begins, those were initially considered for multifamily, but eventually removed from the proposal and then ultimately just remained commercial. So the applicant seeks to change the entire designation for all the tax lots involved to community service government. And then as you can see by the comprehensive plan map, to the east of Liberty is predominantly single family residential in yellow. There's some multifamily, also in that area. And then there are some pockets of commercial land, like along Pine Street. And as you go to the north and south of the subject property, you really see a defined commercial designation corridor between Liberty and commercial within the couplet there. And that really lines up with the Highline neighborhood plan that I'll show you in a second in terms of the desired land use activity for this area. West of Commercial Street, you see industrial commercial comprehensive plan designation. And then finally, when you get over towards the Willamette River on the waterfront, it's river-oriented mixed uses. So the property is within the Highline Neighborhood Association. The Highline Neighborhood Association has a neighborhood plan, and in that neighborhood plan, they have a land use map that identifies the subject property identified with the star here, red star, and properties to the north and south within the commercial Liberty Street couplet as being designated as community shopping. And so the neighborhood plan discusses the intent of the community shopping designation as being intended to provide commercial, neighborhood commercial, and community shopping services that would provide a benefit for the residents in the area. And the neighborhood plan talks about providing, good connectivity, across, Liberty and commercial for folks to get to that service. So when you look at the comp plan map and the neighborhood plan map, and then the zoning, you really see this distinct commercial corridor between the 2 streets, except for in the late 90s when there was the SMRFLS change that redesignated, 5 of those lots as multifamily. So in terms of the zoning, like the comp plan map, there's a couple different designations that apply to the north. The northern portion is commercial general CG. The southern portion of the property is RM2. the applicant is proposing to change the zoning for the entire site to public service to allow the existing use to become conforming and to expand the use. And then the zoning map reflects the comprehensive plan designations with majority single-family residential and multifamily to the east of Liberty. You see the commercial corridor, between Liberty and Commercial to the north and south of the property. And then when you get west of Commercial Street, the zoning is IC, industrial commercial, which reflects kind of the mixture of industrial and some residential and automotive businesses that are in that area. In terms of the property itself, it's 1.89 acres in size. It's currently developed for, as I said, ODOT signal shop facility. The current facility consists of an office portion of the building on the east portion of the site near Liberty Street. There's a large open warehouse building where a lot of the maintenance and assembling and testing of the signs can occur. And then the area, the rest of the area that's developed by the facility is comprised of access and vehicle storage and sign storage, not vehicle storage, but sign storage rather, and vehicle circulation around the building. When you throw the zoning map on there, the majority of the site that's developed is occupied by the commercial general zoning. There are portions of the site that however, do bleed into the existing multifamily zoning, and that's because there is an existing two-way driveway onto Liberty Street that covers a portion of the multifamily zoning here. And there's also this tax lot in the middle here that is pretty much fully, dedicated right now to ODOT storage and vehicle use area of that portion of the site. ODOT is proposing to expand, for additional outdoor storage on the southwest portion of the property, generally located, as shown with the white outline and dash line there. So the next couple slides provide a kind of a bird's eye context and a street level context of the property and the surrounding neighborhood. So this first slide shows what the land use pattern is to the northwest of the subject property. The subject property is outlined in white here. So immediately to the north, you can see there's the Applebee's restaurant. If you're familiar with the couplet, there's a medical office and convenience retail that's provided directly to the north. On the west side, you see, kind of more industrial type storage buildings with, kind of large parking lots, a lot of paving, and there's some homes, distributed throughout there. So there's kind of a mixed, land use pattern on the west side of commercial. East, there is, office, and then you go further east, there's residential, and to the south, you have this non-conforming vehicle storage area that's not allowed in the CG zone, and then also the property management company office. So here's a view looking to the southwest. The Willamette River is off to the far right here on the slide. As you get further, this slide kind of shows as you get further south, in the couplet, you get away from, commercial uses, and you do see more single family homes. So there is single family in the area. And again, you have the retail uses and commercial uses to the north, the mix of industrial and homes, to the west, and office and residential to the east. And then finally, one more bird's eye view that kind of looks further to the south, and you can see, there are homes throughout this area, and there's offices, there's pockets of retail on Pine Street. And so again, there's kind of a mixed land use pattern in this area where there's services for residents, and this area in this corridor was, per the comprehensive plan and the neighborhood plan, is intended to be one of those areas to provide additional service opportunities for folks in terms of retail services for folks living in the area. And real quick, a couple of shots that show the property from the ground level. This picture on the top of the screen, that is from on Commercial Street looking to the southeast. It shows the existing warehouse structure where the signs are maintained and repaired. And then you can also see the paved storage area around the outside of the building. As can be seen here, there is currently no landscape setback of 10 feet from the street, and also doesn't have any screening. So the existing site as it's developed currently doesn't meet the city's required landscaping and screening standards. The picture on the bottom is a perspective looking to the northeast at the corner of Commercial and Hickory here. Hickory's to the right, and then Commercial is to the left. Again, you can see the warehouse building and the office building, and then there's the lawn or the grass area. That is the proposed RM, or the existing RM2 portion of the site where ODOT is proposing to expand with their additional outside storage. And again, one more quick shot from the other corner at the southeast corner. You have Liberty on the right, Hickory on the left, and looking to the north with the kind of the grass area where the multifamily zone currently exists. So on August 4th, there was a public hearing with the Planning Commission, and as indicated in the staff report to the council, staff's initial recommendation for this proposal was to not approve it. And the reasons for staff's recommendation of denial was that we found that the proposal didn't meet all of the applicable criteria of the code, and specifically, the requested public designations weren't equally or better suited than the existing commercial and multifamily designations for the property. And the proposal didn't provide for the logical urbanization of the land. And that specifically relates to how the public use designation, the zone, and the comp plan relate with that distinct commercial corridor land use pattern with services providing, commercial businesses providing services to the neighborhood. So it was kind of inconsistent with that. And then also, importantly, the proposal would result in the loss of multifamily land, and not just multifamily land in general, but land that was specifically identified in the past for the city to comply with our deficit of multifamily land. And then also, as indicated in the staff report, the proposal would result in the loss of commercial land when the city has a deficit, and the existing commercial general zoning does help fulfill that need. After the Planning Commission public hearing, the record was left open for 14 days to allow additional evidence and testimony to be provided, and then also the applicant to provide the final rebuttal. During the initial 7-day open record period, staff presented additional alternatives for the Planning Commission to consider should they not agree with staff's recommendation and instead want to approve it rather than deny it. And then the the applicant identified a third alternative for the Planning Commission to consider. The first alternative identified by staff would have resulted in changing the property's zoning to PS only for the portion of the site essentially that's currently occupied by the existing traffic signal facility. That would allow the existing facility to become a conforming use in the code and remove that kind of cloud from over it. And it would retain a majority of the multifamily land, but lose a little bit, where the facility is kind of bled over and developed into the multifamily land. And then there was also conditions associated with it that required landscaping and screening around the entire perimeter of the site to bring it up to the current standards of the public service zone. The second alternative that staff introduced into the record would be to change the entire zoning as recommended by the applicant. It would, however, result in the loss of all of the multifamily on the site. It would allow the facility to become a conforming use in the zone and allow ODOT's proposed expansion that they've identified. And then, similar to the first alternative, there was a condition that required landscaping and screening around the entire site, to minimize any potential visual impacts resulting from the change in the expanded use and to bring the existing site up to conformance. And then finally, the applicant identified the third alternative, and that was to leave the existing CG portion of the site intact, then also leave the multifamily portion intact for the southeast portion of the property, but then change to PS for the southwest corner of the property where they're proposed to expand. That would still leave the cloud of non-conforming over the existing traffic signal shop facility in the CG zone. It would result in multifamily land being retained, but a smaller amount, and it would be kind of more hemmed in by non-residential uses. And the request also would have been to apply less landscaping than what would be fully required to comply with the PS zone. So those alternatives were introduced. The Planning Commission reopened the public hearing on August 18th to ask questions of staff and the applicant. After doing that, the Planning Commission closed the hearing and then went into deliberations. They considered staff's initial recommendation and the three alternatives. And there was an initial vote to approve staff's recommendation that ultimately did fail. And then subsequent to that, there was a second motion to approve the applicant's request with the conditions that were established in alternative 2 that put a trip cap on the property to limit the number of vehicle trips that can be generated by the site in order to comply with the transportation system, or to goal 12 transportation, but also the landscaping requirement to ensure that not only the existing facility but the proposed new developed area would also have to have screening around it to minimize visual impacts. The Planning Commission based their decision on finding that the proposal did meet with the conditions, the applicable approval criteria, and their decision was based on consideration of one, ODOT's ownership of the property dating back to the 70s, and the fact that the property has been used as the traffic signal shop facility for some time. There was consideration that while the property is under state ownership, there's really not a lot of opportunity for the property to be developed for commercial or residential uses. And so that's kind of a hindrance there for it to fulfill that plan designated, commercial and multifamily need. They also felt that if at some point in the future ODOT were to leave the site and they were to surplus it, that based on the limited rather restrictive list of uses that are allowed in the public service zone, either ODOT or the future buyer would have to apply for a new comprehensive plan and zone change for the property. And then at that time, the most valid and relevant land use designation would be considered for the property at the time it's sold, based on the conditions of the property and the surrounding area at that time. Also, the decision allowed the existing facility to become conforming in the zone, and it allows ODOT to meet their their needs for expanded operation. The landscaping and screening conditions minimize impacts and bring the entire property up to the current code standards. There was discussion amongst the commissioners about the location of the property not being ideal for multifamily due to its size and proximity to incompatible uses, and then also between two state highways, so busier roads. And then finally, there was consideration of the lack of any concerns raised from the neighborhood by the request, and then also the support of the Highline Neighborhood Association. Despite those considerations, however, staff is recommending that the council reverse the Planning Commission decision because, as previously indicated in this presentation, the proposal will result in the loss of multifamily land, and specifically that Smurfels land that was identified to meet our multifamily land supply when we have a deficit. It will also result in the loss of commercial land, and the proposed public designations are not consistent with the vision that's established by the comprehensive plan and the Highline neighborhood plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce, very much. Matt Hasty.
Yes. Are you ready for my presentation?
For you, yes. And
Okay.
how much time to Dan?
So Dan's going to start us off. He's probably just going to spend a minute or two.
Just a sec.
I will stick to within the 10 minutes. I'll be as quick as I can.
You're the 10-minute guy? Okay. And Dan?
Dan's
how long are you up?
Not very long. Bryce did a of doing about 90% of my presentation.
Okay, so you're going to go first, Dan.
Yeah, yes, I will. Thank you. And members of the council, for the record, Dan Fricke. I'm a senior planner of the Oregon Department of Transportation Region 2 office in Salem. Just very quickly, in this case, as I said, I want to thank Bryce for his very complete and I think very fair presentation of both sides of the argument. And as the applicant, we would request your approval and adoption, approval of the Planning Commission recommendation and adoption of the package of comprehensive plan amendments, zone changes in the Highland Neighborhood Association plan that recognizes the long-term use of this property. As Bryce pointed out, this property was originally purchased by the old State Highway Department, ODOT's predecessor, beginning in 1971, and we have recently discovered some evidence that we began modifying the building as early as 1972. So this is a long-term use, almost 50 years this use has been on the site. And again, we don't have any plans to be anywhere else for the future. This facility provides configuration and testing of traffic control devices, both signals and variable message signs and other things. For not only ODOT facilities statewide, but also we provide that configuration testing and training for local agencies. So it is an important facility statewide. Just to turn this thing over, I'd like to note that with us tonight is Laura Wilson, who's the on-site manager of the TSSU facility. If you've got any specific questions about what goes on the property, the kind of things we do, she would be the best person to direct those questions to do. But Mayor Bennett, with your permission, I'd like to now turn the rest of our presentation time over to Matt Hasty, our consultant from Angelo Planning Group, who can go through the remainder.
Okay, great. Matt, 10 minutes, eh?
Yep, and I will do my best to do it in less, and I'll try not to repeat.
No problem. No problem.
Either Dan or Bryce said. So just, you know, Dan already talked about how long this facility's been there, how long it's been in operation. I would note it predates the neighborhood plan, most of the commercial uses in the area, and I believe it actually predates your comprehensive plan adoption as well.
Matt, could you introduce yourself? Just kind of, who are you?
Yeah, my apologies. My name is Matt. Okay. I'm with Angelo Planning Group. We're a land use planning firm in Portland, Oregon. Address is 921 Southwest Washington Street, number 468 in Portland. And represent. Thank you. Yep, thank you. So it's been there a long time, really predates a lot of what's occurred around it. Dan already talked about, and Bryce also talked about what ODOT does at the facility and the rationale and the reasons for pursuing this zone change. Really, the primary reason is to be able to use the southwest corner of the site for some additional storage, outdoor storage of signs between the time that they're brought to the facility and then moved. They don't stay there very long. They tend to be there for a few weeks or a couple of months, and then they're moved off to where they're placed in operation. There's no proposal to develop any structures or buildings on the site, just to use a portion of that site for the same thing that ODOT does with the rest of the site. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of what you heard related to capacity for future housing and commercial development. And we have really a different take on this based on looking at the city's own documents related to housing and commercial development. So as you all probably know, the city's primary planning documents for looking at future housing needs and the supply of land for future housing needs are the housing needs analysis and the buildable lands inventory. And in fact, those documents indicate that this site does not actually represent future capacity for housing because it's owned by a public agency with no plans to use this property for housing in the future. So your planning documents indicate that this doesn't actually represent any capacity for housing in the planning period. We already kind of talked about the fact that while ODOT's using the site, they don't plan to develop that portion for multifamily residential use. I would also note that when the SMRPL process rezoned that portion of the site, there was no amendment to the neighborhood plan at that point. So that's not particularly consistent with that neighborhood plan either, I would note. Same kind of thing with the commercial capacity. The city has an economic opportunities analysis. It assigned very little capacity to the site, just to a very small portion of the site that currently is paved, like an eighth of an acre, I think is what they assign. So really, this is all kind of, I would call it phantom capacity that you would be losing if you rezone this site, given the actual capacity noted in your planning documents and ODOT's plans for the site. And that was what we stated in our findings in the application. We do think, and we were happy that the Planning Commission supported the zone change application and noted that they believed that we did meet the approval criteria. We do believe that the public service designation is the more consistent and better suited designation for this property, given the long-term use of it and the proposed future use by ODOT. One of the criteria has to do with that providing a public benefit and being in the public interest. We already talked about, we talked at length in the application about the fact that ODOT's meeting statewide transportation needs as well as local needs, including the city of Salem has equipment tested at this facility and does training at this facility. So this is meeting both a statewide and a local need. And frankly, is having really low impact on the community in terms of traffic impacts and operations. And you kind of saw in Bryce's presentation the mix of uses surrounding the area. Really, there's not a consistent community shopping sort of pattern in this area. Those types of uses have not developed over the long term in that sort of long, narrow swath of land between commercial and Liberty. You heard that the Highland Neighborhood Association supports this proposal. We went and talked to them about this. There's a couple of quotes from that meeting here on the slide. There have been no other property owner comments of opposition. The one, and then you also saw in your packet, I believe, supportive comments from the City of Salem's Transportation Signal Maintenance Supervisor, because the city does work with ODOT in terms of operation of this facility, testing of their equipment, training of their staff. So really a fair bit of public support and neighborhood support for this and no public opposition. So in reviewing the Planning Commission's findings, really Bryce kind of covered all of the things that are listed here on this conclusion slide, that they found that our findings did address the approval criteria, that the long-term use of this site indicates that it is best suited to the public service designation, that it won't have really any impact, the zone change won't have impact on the surrounding neighborhood, that we are providing a statewide and local public benefit, as well as stable employment on the site, and that the recommendation is supported by the neighborhood association with no local public comments in opposition. They noted, the Planning Commission noted, that this was a very challenging, it was a difficult set of deliberations for them. I think they said it was one of the toughest ones they've had, and I don't remember how long they said, but quite a while. But ultimately they recommended approval of this, and we would just urge you to support their recommendation and also recommend approval of our application. So I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Under, and
thank you very much.
Questions.
Does anyone have any questions then? Matt? Okay. Any questions for staff?
I've got a question, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you can.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
You're muted.
Sorry, I have a couple questions. The first is, I'm curious as to, a lot of this in the staff report is leaning on the neighborhood plan. And I'm curious as to what the age of Highlands neighborhood plan is, and then also how, I guess, is that considered in these types of decisions? Because it doesn't come up often. Usually we're dealing with like a rezoning or something when it comes to council, or a use or conditional use. We haven't really reviewed a whole lot of comp plan requests, at least in my term on council, but could you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so the Highland Neighborhood Plan dates back to 1984, and whenever there's a comprehensive plan change, the neighborhood plans, when they're adopted for neighborhood associations that have them, there are specific components that are considered to be elements of the larger comprehensive plan as a whole, or the policies plan. And those two elements are the map, their land use map, and and the goals and policies that are adopted. And so whenever there is a change to a designation like this, from public or from multifamily, residential, and commercial to another designation, the criteria, requires us to evaluate not only the change for the comprehensive plan map itself, but also those applicable elements of the goals and policies of the comp plan and the map. So when you look at the land use pattern that is established, staff believes, in that Highland neighborhood plan, it shows, again, this very distinct, designation of commercial between Liberty and commercial. Then on the west, there's a distinct area of industrial use when you look at that, the comprehensive plan map. And then to the east, it identifies neighborhood and mixed and multifamily predominantly. And so the policies of the neighborhood plan, when you look at those, it does identify that area that we're looking at here as being intended to serve, provide commercial services to the neighbors of the area. And granted, with being inside the couplet, it also provides services to folks that are coming to and from Salem, quite frankly, with the Starbucks there. And so when you're coming in and out, there's places to stop for convenience as you're coming and going. But the neighborhood plan does identify that as a commercial area. And I think it's important to look at those properties to the north because those were originally, slated for multifamily. However, they didn't get designated that way, but those have developed, to the vision that's identified in the Highland neighborhood plan. There's a restaurant, there's convenience retail, there's some medical office, and convenience retail. So To the north, it's happened, since ODOT has been a longtime owner of the property here, that, they haven't been looking to sell the property. So that could be one reason, obviously, why there hasn't been any, change, in the land use in this area, because in that property, because ODOT owns it, obviously, and they haven't wanted to sell it or to anybody that wanted to develop it consistent with the plan. Properties, when you go further to the south, they tend to be a little bit parcelized and smaller in size. With single family homes on them. So in order to develop those for a commercial, type of business, you'd have to buy several homes and then, essentially take them down and consolidate the lots if you were to do a similar, type of commercial development. So there's some structural challenges, I guess, to those properties to the south where maybe you don't see a lot of residential, or commercial, even though they are designated that on the neighborhood plan and in the comprehensive plan. And the existing zoning does allow for existing homes in those commercial areas to continue as a continued use. So there's that provision also. But yeah, the neighborhood plan, it's a component of the comprehensive plan. And that's why, looking, for how that neighborhood plan further fleshes out the vision of the comprehensive plan, I guess you could say, in a little bit greater detail. That's why we were, considering that and we're required to consider it.
Thank you. If I could follow up or ask a follow up, well, it sounds like the neighborhood plan's it's an important consideration in the comp plan. They go together. I also had a question about, well, two things, I guess, is I'm curious as to as we're doing our Salem, what the vision is, the draft our Salem plan. What is this looking like? There's that interactive tool out there now where you can go look, and I haven't, but I'd be curious to know that. And the second thing is, as far as the housing needs analysis, I'm curious as to how multifamily acreage is counted. In my example, I kind of wrote for myself is, are we counting just the lot square footage? Like, so would a 4-plex be counted the same as an 8-plex if it was on the same lot? Or are we counting that differently? I'm just trying to get a better understanding of that, because some of our stuff, I don't know. I'll let you answer those two things.
Okay, well, in terms of the our Salem, there aren't any, identified changes for this. And Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but there aren't any, changes to this property in terms of our Salem. But there, and then in terms of the housing, how the housing needs analysis was structured and how that's counted, yeah, I would default to Lisa Andersen, who will be the deputy planning administrator, to reflect that, because she's much more involved in that long range planning aspect of that.
Great, thanks, Bryce. Hi, Lisa Andersen will be your planning administrator. Bryce is right. This property doesn't show any changes in our Salem, but some of the properties to the south we're showing as redesignating to mixed use throughout that corridor. For your question, when we're looking at units or multifamily, we're looking at acreage or just total number of units as well in the HNA. So we looked at our past permits and how many units we get generally per acre, and then kind of calculated that out. So we know how many units that we need in the future, our deficit, but we generally look at it by acreage. So a little over 200 acres is our deficit based on getting about 14 acres per unit over all the multifamily land.
So really quick, sorry. So if we had on the same lot, more or less units, it would be counted the same in the housing needs as far as acreage towards the housing needs?
Yeah, and it wouldn't matter if it's RM1 or RM2. It's really based on the comprehensive plan designation, which would just be multifamily. So it's kind of just an average over all of our developments.
So if we had an acre and put in 100 units or whatever, and then you had an acre and you put in 15 units, it wouldn't change our deficit in terms of that, just to be really clear.
Well, so in our multifamily land, we have minimum and maximum densities, right? So we looked at that, and then we looked at what over our permit history, what was actually being developed, and then came up with 14 units per acre is kind of the average. Now, if you're talking about downtown, where there's no minimum or maximum, we see higher density because people aren't doing parking, they're doing more. So we, calculated something different for that. In our commercial zones where we allow multifamily, our mixed use zones, we calculated something different for that. And then our multifamily land, we're just considering 14 units. The HNA does say specifically how many units we need over the next 20 years. We always focus on the acreage, but there is a unit number that goes with it. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but they're kind of based on the same thing, which is the 14 units per acre.
Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Anderson-Ogilvie, I have a question for you before you hop away. I think I understood Mr. Hasty to suggest that this property wasn't really part of our multifamily deficit because it was never going to be multifamily because it's a public use. Is that, can you clarify that for me or talk to that point a little bit?
Sure. So the basis for the housing needs analysis is a buildable lands inventory. So the first thing you do is you look at your land, what it's designated, and what land's developed, what land is vacant, partially vacant, what land is constrained by like natural resources, that kind of thing. And then one of the things you do is you can exclude certain lands. And so we did exclude all land that was publicly owned. And so we didn't go through and look at every publicly owned parcel and look at the zoning and see if it was going to be developed as something other than a public use. We just assumed it was going to be a public use. So we didn't count this land on our buildable lands inventory, and we didn't count this land as available for multifamily. However, when you do a comprehensive plan change, you do have to do an analysis under goal 10. Goal 10 is the housing goal. And so when we do that analysis, our look at it is that we know we have a deficit of multifamily land. And so when we have land that already has the right designation, it's very difficult for us to say, well, it doesn't matter because we didn't count it before, and let's just get rid of it. So from staff's perspective, we didn't count it as available because of the ownership, but it is difficult for us just to say it shouldn't be available in the future for multifamily when we know we have this deficit. And when we looked at the factors of where multifamily land should go, and it meets many of those factors, and that the city designated this for multifamily the last time we had a deficit in the 1990s, right? So we went through and purposely picked this property for multifamily to meet that deficit. So that's kind of where our recommendation came from.
Thank you. And if I could just follow up. So just to clarify, so at the practical level, this wouldn't have an impact. From the sort of theoretical level, it would. But from the actual, it's not actually going to impact that one way or the other on the practical level at this point, right?
Right. It won't add to the deficit. It just won't help the deficit if it's redesignated.
Thank you.
I want to just real quickly follow up on this, and then it's Councilor Nanke on this specific discussion. The Smurfles activity. Now I'm trying to remember how that worked, but I kind of have a recollection that in fact that resulted in whole sweeps of land being sort of labeled multifamily. And I'm thinking particularly of an experience I had with Planning Commission and as a counselor with area over in the Summer and Capitol Street area where that council just did a whole strip and said, well, that's all multifamily, it's all single family. But they sort of said, well, this could all be multifamily in order to meet that shortage. And I'm wondering if that's kind of what happened here too, in the Smurfles part of it. I've always thought that was sort of a kind of a sloppy piece of work done by that 90s council because they just sort of shot it through neighborhoods. And we had some battles because of. Can you explain that to me a little bit?
I can explain what I know. So I did review a lot of the files from Smurfles for this case, and they did have quite a bit of a deficit. I believe it was around 800 or 900 acres, much larger than we have today. So they did need to find a significant amount of land to rezone. Most of the large multifamily apartment complexes that we've been approving over the last 10 years is on land that was Smurfles land. So that is where we're seeing most of our multifamily development. But there was the idea that some of the closer inland that was already developed would be redeveloped to multifamily. Either the parcels would be consolidated or they would take a house and add a few units. And so they did rezone some areas that never really converted to multifamily and don't really make a lot of sense to be multifamily. I will say for this property, when I looked at the files, not just these 5 parcels were proposed for multifamily, but I think as Bryce explained, all the way up to the Parkway was the original proposal. So there would have been a pretty large chunk of multifamily. But the other property owners to the north submitted letters in objection. And at the time it was a nonprofit ownership. And due to that, the city council in their report said that they were taking out most of that property from their proposal. And so only went forward with those those 5 parcels and left the rest as commercial. We didn't see any letters of objection from ODOT in the files. And there's nothing in the staff reports that indicate that ODOT objected, even though they were the owners at the time and got notice. So I believe that's why the council left it in.
Okay. Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is an interesting one. I just love it anytime somebody says Smurfles. Having been involved with that from back in the 90s as well, and I know there was a significant deficit, and we were trying to pull all lands possible in to kind of make that deficit up. You know, this property to me doesn't necessarily scream multifamily. Mixed use potential. I like the neighborhood plan of commercial through that extent, but based on the proposal in front of council today, is the only restriction to current operation based on their wanting to expand the storage area to the south.
Yeah, that's correct. You know, and this is Bryce again. So
just to bring it back to why we're here.
Yeah, so the existing CG zone, which, you know, applies to the majority of the site, if you remember from the slides where the facility is currently located, ODOT's been operating there, you know, for years. You know, as long as they don't need to come in for any kind of land use approval to add on to the building or to expand, they can continue to do so. They just have this non-conforming status that's associated with it, and non-conforming use and development can continue unless and until terminated. You know, the need to expand area where it's not currently developed in this new area of the site, yeah, that's, you know, where really the issue really comes to a head, and they're not allowed to do that because the use isn't allowed. So that's what they're trying to solve, is to change the zoning so they could do the expansion. And even if you consider their third alternative that they had, it was just to rezone the portion of the site to PS where they were looking to expand, and it would just leave the existing commercial general zone in place. That would still leave them as non-conforming, but the idea was that they would try to, you know, get the PS zone so they could expand. But yeah, it's really the expansion and improvements to the site are where it becomes an issue with the zoning.
Excellent. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure we anchored ourselves to what the topic of the day was.
Councilor Andersen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Nanke really addressed one of my questions. If this is the case, then I'll move on to another question. My understanding is ODOT's intention on the area that is now currently zoned RM2 is to build an outdoor storage lot and nothing else. And I'm looking at you, Mr. Hasty, and you're, okay, good. My next question is a brief one too. We said that the Planning Commission said this was a pretty tough decision on them. What was the initial vote on the staff recommendation?
It was 5.
The number.
Sorry, it was 5. You know, 3 in favor of staff's motion to deny, and then 5 against.
My next question is for Ms. Andersen Ogilvie. One of the reasons, and this is on page 8 of your staff report, number F, why the Planning Commission said this is why we'll go ahead and vote against the staff recommendation. The property's lack of suitability for multiple family development due to its location, near incompatible uses, and along state highways, and its small size, which would make it cost prohibitive to develop multifamily. Did you respond to that? Do you agree with what the Planning Commission said on that? And Bryce, you can answer, or Lisa, you can answer.
Lisa, I'll leave it to you. Yeah.
I thought you would.
Put me in the hot seat, Bryce. I understand that perspective, but I don't agree. I don't think the site is too small. We've been seeing small infill multi-development, you know, 5 units, 6 units, 8 units, and we just changed our code to make that easier. So I don't think size is prohibitive. As Bryce mentioned, it is next to services. You know, there's small scale services right next to it. There's a grocery store very nearby with Fred Meyer. It's on a bus line, and there's employment opportunities. So when we're, you know, thinking about our Salem and areas where we are picking multifamily because we're going to bring 200 acres forward, you know, to the city council to rezone in the next year to meet our deficit, we're looking for locations that meet a lot of those requirements. There are busy streets, Commercial and Liberty, but we are proposing lots of mixed use and multifamily along our major corridors, especially ones that are served by transit. So no, that staff doesn't agree with that analysis.
Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, well, I have a comment and then a question. I think we've talked enough about the suitability of this property for multifamily. And I'm very familiar from being on the Planning Commission for 10 years about Smurfles. Some of the designations were right on and some were not. This property represents about 1/2 of 1% of the needed 207 acres for multifamily. So it really is, from that standpoint, insignificant. But my question is, and quite frankly, after 10 years on the Planning Commission and almost 6 years on the City Council, I've never run into the situation where staff recommendation is countered by staff comments. And in the comments from the traffic signal maintenance supervisor, he mentions that the facility, the ODOT facility, provides very important service to our city and our community. Ultimately, it helps us improve traffic safety, which has significant benefits to the public. So can you confirm, can somebody, I'm not sure who to ask, but are we getting a true benefit, the city of Salem getting a true benefit from the usage of this property in conjunction with ODOT?
Well, I would say, Councilor Lewis, that yeah, that is true, as Dan indicated. There is training that occurs here, but it can still continue on at this location, without having the zone change. It's the storage expansion that makes the issue that makes the issue with the zoning and needing to have PS zone rather than RM2. But it also doesn't mean that maybe service couldn't be provided in another location with the city under other land that ODOT may currently own, but yeah, so yes, it does provide a benefit locally, but then a greater benefit to the state, because of the signs that are deployed, from here to be used in road projects. But there is also this land use pattern of commercial, and you have this kind of warehouse appearance development, in the middle of it, and it doesn't fit with that context, and that benefit could still, without a change, could still continue on because it happens today. There just wouldn't be the ability to have more sign storage on the property.
Questions? Right. Mr. Hasty, your rebuttal, if you'd like to.
Yeah, I'd like to say a few things. One, I would kind of agree with the characterization of the Smurfles process. I think you had a very large deficit to make up. You rezone multifamily land all over the city. I think it's unfortunate ODOT wasn't paying better attention. I think they would have objected to this rezoning, and I don't think that land would have been rezoned to multifamily had that occurred. It's less than an acre. It is challenging to develop a parcel that size for multifamily. So I would tend to agree with the comments from the Planning Commission and tend to disagree with staff's comments on the suitability of it. It is surrounded. There are no other multifamily zone properties directly adjacent to this property. So it's this very small, very isolated piece of property. Given parking requirements, height limitations, et cetera, you would not be able to fit very many units on this site. I don't think you could even achieve the city's 14 dwelling units per acre, given the size and the configuration of the site. So I would disagree with some of the comments from staff about the suitability and concur with the comments from the Planning Commission. I would also, again, note that this is essentially phantom inventory. While ODOT owns this property, it's not going to be developed for multifamily use, nor will it be developed for commercial use. At such time as ODOT leaves the property, it's going to be in their best interest to rezone it for whatever makes the most sense. And ODOT offered to submit to that, to basically enter into some kind of agreement or condition of approval that they would do that. I would agree that it is providing a benefit to the city and to the state as a whole. If ODOT can't expand just into this small portion of the site, to add outdoor storage, and they're not proposing to add any facilities there, outdoor storage facilities, simply to put the signs on that portion of the site. If they can't do that, they'll need to move those signs to other sites to temporarily store them elsewhere. So that is going to cost money. It's going to cost the state money. It's going to cost the taxpayers money. So this is providing a benefit to the community and to the state, the proposed rezoning, really with, I'd say, again, minimal impact to the neighboring property owners. So I appreciate the questions and the comments from councilors about some of these issues. And I'm just going to continue to recommend that you support the Planning Commission's recommendation. And there's maybe a minute or so left if Dan has anything to add to that. And thank you.
Dan, do you have anything?
I think I'll just save you time and say, reiterate our support for the Planning Commission recommendation and request your adoption.
Thank you. Dan Atchison.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything else we need now?
No, not at this point. You can close the hearing and entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll close the hearing. Councilor Osick, this is in your ward. You want to make a motion?
I'm going to move staff recommendation.
Second.
Second by Kaiser.
Thanks. And just to quickly wrap up my thoughts on what we heard is that I understand that right now it's providing a benefit as folks are saying, but at the same time, and there's a long-term planning process that has seen that this would be a place where we could potentially have and address some of our deficits in multifamily and commercial zones. So while to the practical point of it may not make a difference today that multifamily will unlikely be built there today, it's more of that long-term view of, at some point ODOT may grow out of the site altogether or whatever and move on and be ready to have, and we need to be prepared for this site to be a long-term, the zoning to be a long-term plan instead of a, just right now, it's not going to change things today, but, and so that's why I support what the staff is saying.
Roy?
Mr. Mayor, I'm really torn on this one, or at least I was at the beginning, but I think after listening to everything, I'm going to respectfully disagree with my colleague from Ward 5. I have a real practical side of me that comes out sometimes, and then in this case, the fact of the matter is this isn't going to be multifamily. It's an ODOT facility that's been an ODOT facility for decades. I just think that we're to support the staff recommendation would be supporting just sort of this theoretical thing that doesn't really exist. And I just think that the Planning Commission made a good decision here, and I think we ought to support the Planning Commission in this one. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Councilor Nanke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This one's, it is tough. Do I really see multifamily ever happening on this site? No. Do I think the best usage of the property is commercial general? Yes. Knowing that its current ownership lies with ODOT and what their needs are now doesn't predispose redevelopment down the line. Someone would have to pay for a zoning change at that point, but to look at the layout that's proposed doesn't make a lot of sense either. I'm really torn at which way to go on this one. Personally, I'd say keep it all commercial general, but that's not an option for us. But to outright deny all of it, knowing that they have current use of that location and aren't likely to change that doesn't really do us any good. So it's tough dealing with criteria versus intent of ownership as well. So I'll make up my mind here as I hear other people talking on which way I'm actually going to vote on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an interesting case, as much as it might not seem like it on the surface. But my thought on the matter is this: we should be making our decisions based on the standards and guidelines and criteria laid out in the comprehensive plan, the neighborhood plan, and state law. And as much as it might make sense for this to be public service and for ODOT to continue their activities and expand, even because they've been doing it for 50 years, what we really need to consider is it doesn't meet the standards. And that is separate from ownership, and that's separate from current use. And the other question we really need to ask ourselves is, what is the vision for the property in the future? And that's laid out through the comprehensive plan. It's laid out through the neighborhood plan. And right now it's laid out through our Salem. And that's in progress. And I think these decisions are very difficult, knowing that that's literally in flight and will be before the council in a few months' time. But I really see this as a case, to Councilor Hoy's point, practical and theoretical sometimes conflict, and this might be the case, but as a quasi-judicial decision, we have to consider the facts and what's laid out in the guidelines. And I don't think the applicants made the case here other than they just used it for a long time for this, and not necessarily, is this what the city wants the property to be in the future? One of the considerations there is the maximum that this could be used to in the future. For example, is the state of Oregon going to come in there and perhaps take over that property because they already own it and put like a large commercial office building there, or whatever it might be. And so I think you have to explore those things. You have to take it to extremes, because that's what we're doing. We're saying you're going to allow these certain uses, regardless of what the applicant or owner is using for it right now. It's what they could use it for in the future. You have to consider that, because that's what you're ultimately allowing. So as much as the practical might say, well, currently they're going to use it as this, and they're saying they're going to do that, the fact is that we don't know the future, and we have to make our best assessment based on the standards and guidelines and criteria we have in front of us. And I just don't think it's there for this. And I wish there was an alternative here that made more sense. But if this isn't following the comp plan and the neighborhood plan, I'm having a really hard time getting there, because that's literally what we've set our standards on. And we have to make sure that we're doing that the same across all applicants, regardless of who they are and what they're doing with their property.
Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I think the presentation by staff and by Mr. Hasty have been very good, and I appreciate the hard effort that everybody's gone into this. And it's a difficult decision, as seen by what the planning commission did. Part of what comes down to me is the need to have infill. It's not so much, let's look at how many acres this is compared to the 200 acres we need, but part of what I think as the council we're trying to do, at least what I'm trying to do, is get a higher density infill closer to the city core. And based on what Deputy Director Anderson Ogilvy says, in fact, this is a possibility to do that. So it's a very hard decision for me, but I'm going to vote for the motion.
Councilor Nordike.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend my colleagues and all of the presenters for engaging in a civil discussion of local issues. I think that the civility of these proceedings and how thorough these proceedings are means that no matter how this vote comes down, I firmly believe if you respect the process, you can respect the outcome. So I think that should not go unmentioned, because civility is at an all-time low in so many other facets of our lives. So that aside, I do look for opportunities for smart infill. And I do care about what our neighborhood plans and comprehensive plans have to say. And I do care about the possibility and the prospect of using this for commercial purposes down the road. It's not a large acre, it's not a large space, but it doesn't have to be to provide a positive impact in that neighborhood. We all know even food carts take up a tiny space. So it's entirely possible to follow through with that vision in the long run, even if it's not before us today. So I will be supporting staff's recommendation, but I really appreciate all the thought and time that went into this, because this is how our democratic process is designed to work.
Okay. Any further we'll call the roll.
Councilor Andersen.
Aye.
Councilor Nanke.
Sorry, I was on mute. Aye.
Councilor Leung.
Nay.
Councilor Osik.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
No.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
No.
Councilor Kaiser.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Tell me if it passed or not. I wasn't counting.
It passed, yes.
Motion passed. Okay, we'll move on. 2, special orders of business. Dan, on this, do we start with like 5A and Atchison?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll start with 5A then. Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move the City Council waive Council Rule 21A to permit a councilor-nominee or councilor-elect to serve as a guest councilor at a regular and special meeting multiple times through December 1st, 2020.
Second. I think you meant December 31st.
What did I say?
First.
First? Okay, 31st.
Okay. Yeah, December 31st. I'm trying to read through my light and cables over here.
Okay, still okay, Tom? You still second? Okay. Go ahead, Councilor Nanke.
And just a comment, when we elect city councilors, whether or not we like it or not, it's typically done in the primary. And so you'll have someone who's going to be a councilor, over 7 months in the future. It's nice for them to be able to, one, get accustomed to the seat, as well as we approach the turn of the year. There may be work sessions and council meetings that have significant impacts on things that won't be voted on until after a new term is in play. And it's my intention to bring this back at the next council meeting to make this permanent. I thought in our emails originally that was the intent, but I just want to make sure I express that intent now, because one of the other council rules designates that we have to wait 10 days to actually change those council. We could do it tonight. I tend to be a fan of process because there could be things in the future that people may want to dwell upon a little bit. This one might be fairly easy. Yes, but I will bring this back at our next meeting to make it into a permanent council change, because I think it's important that we not interrupt the beginning of every meeting to have someone sitting off on the side before they can engage when in fact the voters have elected them to take that position down the road.
Okay. So this is our first cut on this. Sure don't want to suspend the rules and just make this permanent, huh? Okay.
No, I'll stay with procedure.
Okay, further discussion? Hey, Councilor Hoy.
I support this motion. Somebody went mute. Sorry. I support this motion. I think it's a good idea. I support everything Brad just said.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hey, you please call a roll.
Councilor Nanke,
Aye.
Councilor Leung,
Aye.
Councilor Osick,
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Nordijk,
Aye.
Councilor Lewis,
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser,
Aye.
Councilor Andersen,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, Councilor Andersen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the City Council adopt the following goals as part of the city's climate action plan. By 2035, Salem's greenhouse gas emissions shall be reduced to 50% of the citywide greenhouse gas emissions for the baseline year of 2016. And by the year 2050, Salem should be carbon neutral.
Second.
Who seconded? Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're getting late in this meeting tonight, so I'll try to be brief if I can. We had a bunch of citizens who have sent in emails upon this. I like the tragedy of the commons theory that Mr. Andersen did. I also think Lori Doherty for 350.org sent in a good consideration of things. I just want to say that I really think we're in a crisis. The science is clear, and I think we're on the right step here. And I want to say that the Climate Action Task Force is a great task force. It's a good cross-section of community. It's business and civic leaders. It's elected. It's boards and commissions. It's environmental organization. It's academicians. It's environmental justice folks. It's members from our community of color. So I think that's an excellent task force, but their job is not to set the goals. Their job is to develop strategies to reach these goals. Goals are something, policy matters that are set by the council. So I think we should join all the other cities that are in the discussion of my motion and adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor, the only question I have on this is, are we jumping the process? That'd be the only concern I've got. I mean, I understand your concept of the council sets the goals, which will occur presumably as this task force reviews it. It seems like this sort of says to the task force, thank you very much. We'll hold your coat just as you leave. You know what I mean?
I could see that, Mr. Mayor.
To it.
And I actually don't think we're jumping the gun. If you look at all the other cities that have already done it.
I'm not talking about, no, not the goal, but I'm talking about it in the process that you and the rest of the council have developed, which was, since I had to sign the letter, I've asked all these people, including you, to please serve on this thing and to do this really what I thought was going to be a very substantive piece of work and present us with an outcome. You've defined the outcome here, and that's what I'm just asking, do you think I'm wrong in seeing it that way?
Well, of course I do, Mr. Mayor, but I would never say that unless you ask me.
Why don't you just say it?
Let me discuss that. We are setting what I would say are basically aspirational goals. And we as a council, we don't have the bandwidth to come up with how we try to achieve those goals. That's why we have the task force. And I think it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, because I think we need to say it. We're not just going to move forward to these goals. We're going to, without coming back to the council, without having public hearings, without discussing it. And that's going to happen. And as we look 1 year out, 2 years out, we might say, okay, we can't achieve these goals for these reasons, but we can adjust them or we can move forward. So I think we need to establish the aspiration.
Yeah, but are we locking the committee in? I mean, I agree with you completely, your description of what this process would look like, and that it does have a certain amount of flexibility. And I agree with you, there is a crisis. There is something to be concerned about here. And I think it includes setting emission standards, strategies for getting there. It also includes, I hope, a great deal of work on the kind of interim steps we need to be taking, because Salem ain't going to solve this thing. And apparently the whole world isn't quite there yet. So I'm hoping we will have a lot of ideas on how to deal with some of the repercussions of what's going on around us. I'm just a little concerned about turning off members of the commission or the committee that would come on thinking, well, these guys have already decided, it's over. And that's really my big concern.
I can appreciate those concerns, Mr. Mayor, and I think that it would be our job to make sure the task force knows that we want their input to help us to try to achieve these aspirational goals, and we'd like feedback from them. I think if we say to them, you give us the goals, we're going to get bogged down in a 40-member commission as to looking at goals, and you know, sometimes that gets us to the lowest common denominator. I think the council ought to be the leader here and set the aspirational goals and with periodic check-ins to see if those goals are still good.
Okay, well, I'm a little uncomfortable that you're calling them aspirational goals, because I don't know quite what that means. If you're saying this is a highly flexible set of goals, then say so.
Well, no, I'm saying it's the goal, but I'm saying that's why we have the task force committee to come back and say, you know, give us some feedback on what the goals are. And obviously, I'm just not picking these goals out of the air. Those are the goals.
Oh, you got them from. Yeah, no, you got them from one group, and that's one.
Well, I got them from. I got the material was from 350, but they looked at it and said, "Here's what every other city in Oregon is doing and what they have done."
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you thought this through, Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, real quickly, I don't want to dwell on this too much. I can't support the motion for two reasons. One of them, I believe the mayor alluded to, and I absolutely agree. You're asking a large group to discuss an issue, and you're already telling them what the answer is. But more importantly to me, the Department of Land Conservation and Development is, as we speak, implementing the governor's mandate to reduce greenhouse gas. If it's possible to do this on a wide range basis, like the state of Oregon, why can't we wait and see what their outcome is before the individual cities start jumping in? And so I think for those two reasons, I can't support the motion.
Councilor Nordyke.
Let me start with an analogy here. The Marion Polk Food Share has a goal that is aspirational in nature. Their goal is to end hunger. Now, it may not necessarily mean that you can end hunger, but when you aim high, you can achieve the most possible. When the council voted to create its first ever climate action plan, it had already determined that, yes, we need to take action on climate change. And yes, we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Setting an aspirational goal for this group, for this city, is no different than setting an aspirational goal to end hunger, to end homelessness, to end domestic violence. These are aspirational goals. These are what they are for, to inspire action and to recognize the fact that cities can make a real and tangible impact on climate change. One of the comments we received in the materials for this meeting and on this discussion point points out the fact that cities are integral to fighting climate change, that they are responsible for anywhere between 37 and 49% of greenhouse gas emissions, that urban infrastructure accounts for over 70% of global energy use. And research shows that urban policy decisions made by the year 2020, this very year, can help determine the future of greenhouse gas emissions, determine what the carbon budget is. So by setting an aspirational goal, we are not locking anyone into anything. We are telling them that climate change is real and that we expect real results. And the point of a climate action plan is more than just setting a goal for greenhouse gas emissions. That is just one piece of the puzzle. So this is not putting the cart before the horse. This is setting vision. This is setting policy. That is what we were elected to do. And the members of this task force are not elected officials. They're there to help us get there. They're there to help us with the nuts and bolts, to identify how to work with our business community, our community partners, our stakeholders, everyone. This is about how we work together to achieve the goals that the city has set. So I look forward to supporting this motion.
Okay. Well, that's a good description, I think, of kind of what aspirational goals are. Whenever it's sort of like that, I'm seeking this for world peace, or I mean, that if that's the kind of thing you're thinking, I think that probably is what this might represent. It may be well beyond our capacity, or it may be within our capacity, but I can see what you're saying. Anyone who says they want to end hunger, I do hope it's not just a slogan. I hope that if we're doing this tonight, it's more than just a slogan and what I hear, or something to put on a piece of fundraising material. You know, we're going to end hunger. I hope this means more than that. And if you all are confident that this will not somehow impede the committee getting its work done or cause people to walk away from it, I'm very comfortable. Councilor Kaser.
Thank you. I don't think this is going to impede the committee. And I think that, kind of like Councilor Nordyke said, it's more of a vision, I guess. I didn't write the motion, Councilor Andersen did. If I wrote it, I may have been a little bit more not specific and made it more of a vision, like just say by 2050, Salem should be carbon neutral. And then the committee could figure out how to get there by 2050. But I'm comfortable with the way it is, putting within 15 years, we want to be at 50%, and the 15 years after that, we want to be carbon neutral. But I don't think it ties the hands of the committee at all. In fact, they could come back and recommend a change to those goals. I think that's within their purview completely. But I think this helps set perhaps a benchmark for them to hit. If the council's saying, hey, this is what we're thinking, then they're probably not going to come back and say, let's go for, 10% reduction in 15 years. And we're saying, actually, we want a little bit more than that. So I think it's all right, actually, the way it is.
Okay. Anyone else? Councilor Nanke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, I have a problem with aspirational goals. Having come out of manufacturing where I have to set stretch goals at times is another issue. And if we wanted to set an aspirational goal where we say we want to reduce or eliminate Salem greenhouse gases, that's one thing. But by actually picking a baseline year, in contrast to the baseline year that Governor Brown has put out by 26 years in the future, where our emissions are much higher than back then, and then saying we will be 100% carbon neutral. To me, people do not understand the difference between a 95% reduction in a certain activity and the cost to achieve 99% and the sheer escalation to get from 99 to 100%. Not running this through a committee. I'm fine with stretch goals as long as you understand the topic that you're dealing with and you want to push people that little extra to get a little more. But to set 100% target to me is non-realistic.
Don't you think, though, listening to Councilor Andersen and Councilor Nordyke, who are both on the committee, that's really what they're doing. They're setting a stretch goal.
No, that's not a
locked in stone. I think they both agree.
It's not realistic.
But it's aspirational.
Well, then take the dates and percentages out and just say we're going to eliminate climate change. which we have
I don't think that's what he's talking about.
in its entirety. We have control over potentially certain elements.
Okay.
So
Councilor Hoy?
I'm opposed to the motion.
Okay, I thought you might be. Councilor Hoy?
Thanks for clarifying that. I wasn't clear. I actually struggled with this a little bit as I read the motion initially and was thinking about it. I wondered if we were jumping the gun too. But as I thought more about it, I agree completely with what Councilor Kaiser said. We're basically setting the framework for the committee to do their work, and I think it'll empower them, not disempower them, to really go to achieve this plan for us. And so I'm very comfortable with it. So.
Are you comfortable, Chris, that they could return and say, you know, here are some, we think we can accomplish it by 2035, or, you know, pick another date, whatever it is, at this level, but there are some issues that will fall in between. We need to maybe align with the governor more, or do you see that, Tom? Do you see that possibility?
I think we need to be flexible. And I think if they come back with a compelling argument, we need to listen to it and be prepared to adjust.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, that's exactly why I'm saying we're going to have reviews of this. We're not just going to wait till 2035 and see what happens. You know, it's going to come back to the council on a regular basis.
Right. Mr. Powers, any thoughts on this? There you go.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure, as council considers the motion, that the scope of work for the consultant and for the task force was to develop a greenhouse gas reduction target. So this would be a change to that scope of work. Whether that's good or bad, that is really for you to decide. Because I do think it comes down to, you know, setting aside the specific target in dates. It's really process, as has been discussed by council, and that the task force was going to use, with the help of the consultant, an iterative process to arrive at what would be intended to be broad-based, you know, community supported goals. If council is choosing, no, this is the goal that we want them to work toward, you know, that's certainly a policy choice for council. But I did want you to be aware of this. This is a difference than what had been planned for the task force.
Do you hear, I mean, I'm listening to Councilors Kaiser and Hoy and Andersen and Nordyke that really, does this, this seems to fit with what you're describing, that the scope of work is not affected by this aspirational goal. Or am I don't want to misrepresent anybody's views, but
I think it would modify the scope of work slightly by setting the goal for them. They could then focus on, as has been discussed already, the strategies and tactics, and discuss what is achievable for Salem, and what would need to be modified.
Okay. Does that make sense, Tom? I mean, are you comfortable with that understanding? Sir. Yeah, I just want to make sure that as this is communicated to that committee, it's communicated, I think the way Councilor Nordyke described it, I thought was really a great way to explain what this represents in terms of its reality as a goal. It's a driver. That's, I think, part of the concept. Okay? All ready to vote? Amy, would you call the roll?
Councilor Leung.
Can someone please repeat exactly what the motion is? Is it the original motion made by Andersen?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. He's qualified kind of what he's saying a little bit, but I think he's explaining what his motion means. That's all.
Okay. Aye.
Councilor Ossick?
Aye.
Councilor Hoy,
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke,
Aye.
Councilor Lewis,
No.
Councilor Kaiser,
Aye.
Councilor Andersen,
Aye.
Councilor Nanke,
Nay.
and Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We're on to our next one. It is Councilor Leung.
No, we do have the late edition, Mayor.
Oh, 5C, I'm sorry, Mr. Powers.
Certainly, we can take that. Well, okay, thank you. First of all, thank you, Council, for adding this to the agenda. I really don't like late additions, and I brought this forward only because I recommend approval, and it does provide certainty to the Environmental Protection Agency, and I'll go over that here right now. The Santiam Canyon fires, in addition to a tragic loss of life, have left a considerable amount of ash and debris for cleanup. And we have an interest in that as the Santiam Canyon, the Santiam River, the watershed is the source of our drinking water. Governor Brown, because of the magnitude of the cleanup and the complexity of materials that are in the canyon, requested the Environmental Protection Agency's assistance. The Environmental Protection Agency is here working with the DEQ. They've identified a site for a material staging area. This is an operation that EPA has used in other locations, and we do have a representative from the EPA with us this evening. I presume those other locations have been in California, for example. The State Fairgrounds is a perfect location for the staging, considering other potential sites. The zoning does not allow, after considerable review by Dan and by Dan Atchison and by our Community Development Department, the conclusion was that the zoning does not allow, and EPA, I think, correctly said, well, we would like some assurance from the city before we proceed with a lease for this site, and that is why we're here this evening. I do have, under Salem Revised Code, the ability to declare an emergency. In discussions with Dan Atchison and our emergency management staff and with Peter Fernandez, I do think there is an emergency because of the threat to our drinking water if the materials aren't cleaned up properly and disposed of properly. And the EPA, again, is here to help our region with that work. The site would be near the amphitheater, a paved area away from residential areas. It would allow a more immediate cleanup of potentially hazardous materials that and ash, sedimentation that could cause turbidity in our Guerin Island drinking water treatment facility. So for the reasons of assisting our neighbors, our neighboring communities, but more specifically to help protect our drinking water supply, I did decide to bring this forward this evening for council's consideration, and we do recommend approval. We do have representatives from the EPA and DEQ with us this evening if there are specific questions regarding the use and the in and out, ingress and egress to the property, the types of materials, how it would be set up. The only exception that this resolution would provide, this emergency declaration would provide, is to the zoning. All other safety precautions, I think, given it's the EPA, will actually be exceed what place to protect the land, to mitigate impacts, noise to the neighbors. And with that, given the lateness of the evening and the fact that we have people here who know a lot more about the operations of this than I do, I will stop. And Mr. Palms from the DEQ and Mr. Franklin from the EPA are here with us this evening if there are questions from councilors.
Councilors, do you have any questions? Or are you ready to just okay this emergency declaration? It's our water system at stake. That's kind of what it is. Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. The first is, I understand why they want to use the fairgrounds for this. I am concerned about the idea of hazardous waste in our fairgrounds in the middle of our city, surrounded by residential neighborhoods. Particularly, I don't understand what the delivery, the staging, the sorting, like what that actually looks like on the ground, and the chance of contaminating the area or things in the air. I mean, this is not an industrial site away from where people live. This is very, very close to neighborhoods. So I have that question. And then my second question is, what other sites were considered? Were there other sites considered that were not in a residential area of the city? And then I guess my third question is, I have serious concerns about the ingress and egress. And if we were to do this, I would very, very much recommend we not use Silverton and 17th to facilitate left-hand turns that don't have dedicated left turn lanes when there's going to be, I guess, dump trucks or semi-trucks or whatever trying to make that corner that we'd use that Silverton Road and Lana Avenue, the back entrance to the fairgrounds, to do that. So those are my three concerns, my three questions.
Do you want to add to your questions then also what the frequency of trips are going to look like? I mean, are we looking at a lot of trips, or is it going to be 5 a day? You know what I mean?
Yep, might as well. It looks like 6 a.m.
Let's see what we're up against here. Okay. Who's the spokesman on this?
I guess I can be Brian, if that's okay. So my name is Richard Franklin. I'm an on-scene coordinator with the EPA. I've been doing a hazardous materials work, emergency response work for 26 years, 11 of those up here. I was a federal incident commander for the tanker truck rollover on the Santiam earlier this year. So yeah, let me see if I can help you with this and allay some of your fears. The crews that will be working in the valley and other places, when we're picking up household hazardous waste. So we're not bringing in ash. We're not bringing in other debris. We're only bringing in what's considered household hazardous waste. No e-waste, no refrigerators, no computers. What we pick up are things like paint cans, any gasoline or diesel that's left or a fire impinged, pesticides, kind of things that would be in your normal garage, right? Propane bottles on your barbecue. Where I come from, it's called a grill, but it's up here, it's a barbecue. So at any rate, we gather all those up with crews that have been doing this for a very long time. We're not new to this. We have an A team that's been doing this for decades, really. And we have worked in the California fires the last several years, and some of those same people will be coming. We make heavy use of contractors. They'll use stake bed trucks, pickups with trailers, and go out into the community after an assessment and with safety in mind. And with COVID, by the way, we follow strict COVID protocols in the field and potentially at the fairgrounds. Those materials that are picked up at the homes or at the properties are bagged in plastic. And so a lot of them are also put in overpacked plastic drums and sealed, or in what we might call a cubic yard box that's also lined. And then those are brought in by box truck. The crews can work out in the field. They transfer those to about a 28-foot box truck. And the box truck comes into the staging area with everything sealed up in bags, again, or in other plastic-lined boxes. And they get staged. They get set on the ground. Then we bulk those. Everything, again, should be sealed. And we put them in maybe larger boxes. To protect the ground surface there on the asphalt surface, we have at least 4 layers of different kinds of plastic. We have filter fabric on the bottom to absorb, to be a cushion. We have poly plastic, 12 mil, quite thick. We have visqueen on top of that and plastic drivable mats on top of those.
So you're bringing in already sealed containers out of the canyon that have been selected and put into sealed containers. That's what's going to be on site. There'll be no ash at this point.
That's correct. They come in, they'll be in big plastic bags that are already tied up. That's correct.
Okay.
And then, well, go ahead. Sorry.
No, what do you think on this part of the question? Councilor Kaiser, do you have an answer?
So that's very, very helpful. Yeah, just to know that that would be contained on site in the canyon before it's brought down to the fairgrounds.
What about other sites? Did you look at other sites in the Salem area?
Yes, sir. And I have looked personally at 30 properties in the area. I have spoken with city staff who's also helped. We've talked to brokers. I've talked to DAS, Department of, I guess, Administrative Services. I've met with the prison system out on site to see if we could find other sites.
This is it, huh?
This is it. DEQ has helped us. The city and county have developed a list of other properties and lots that we might use, and we've gone through those individually one by one to see if it would meet our criteria, which is essentially flat, either gravelled or asphalted, room to work in. I like being away from residences. As to your question on the residences, we will be doing continual air monitoring for things like dust size, asbestos, for volatile organic compounds, benzene, things like that. So in case there's any off-gassing. So we do continual air monitoring and sampling as well. For ingress egress, we would go by what the city would require of us. We already have some suggestions from city staff, certainly not to use Silverton or 17th. We might use the Portland, I believe Portland Drive.
Road.
Yes. And then come down to Sunny, I guess, Sunny, I keep wanting to say Sunnyside, but
Sunny View.
Yeah, Sunny View. Or whatever is appropriate. As far as the number of trucks, we will have some 28-foot boxes and occasionally stake box trucks coming during the day. Probably only about 4 crews, 2 to 4 crews would be working up in that area. We may have some on the west side in Lincoln County and certainly in the Santiam River Valley. We would drop a roll-off box there too. Those would be hauled out every 2 to 3 days. We would have a semi-truck in there pulling out, taking out for disposal, probably 2 or 3 times a week. No more than that is expected.
What would a daily vehicle count look like, do you think?
You know, Mayor, I really don't know the answer to that. It's going to depend on a couple of things. One is we have to have rights of entry for property before we can enter that property. And the counties and DEQ and cities are trying to make that happen. But if we don't get a whole lot of right of entries, then it'll be just very few a day. If we get a whole lot, then we might have.
Mine. You've already got mine. I can tell you that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
First thing I did was get a right of entry on that.
Yeah, we'd probably have box trucks, those 28-foot box trucks coming and going 4 or 6 times a day, something like that. And then we'd have administrative staff there in the morning and in the evening. We have about 8 to 10 people there with federal oversight running it during the day.
How do you all feel? Are these allaying concerns, Councilor Kaiser, or any of you?
Yeah, they are. I would concur with staff that Silverton Road, at least that intersection of Silverton Road and 17th, is not a good choice at all. And to find an alternative, even if that's like I-5 to Hawthorne to Sunnyview, or even Portland Road to Lana, and then you just shoot across Silverton Road to that back entrance, but something else other than what's proposed.
Mr. Powers, one thing I think that I'd like to understand is, will this traffic pattern be adaptable if it's found that it has real negative impacts in, if it was Silverton Road and 17th, it just isn't working in Portland Road or Lana Avenue or whatever, but that this can be adapted to meet the concerns that neighbors might have, or that we see in terms of traffic impacts. Is that?
Yes, Mr. Franklin has been very open, as he's indicated this evening again, has been very open to being responsive to the needs of our really host host facility that needs and feedback from the city. And we'll continue to work with Mr. Franklin and his team on that ingress and egress and adapt as necessary.
Any other, is this getting to what you were thinking, what you asked Kara, is everything covered? Okay, Councilor Hoy.
Just to thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to clarify, so we're talking about household hazardous waste here, similar to what we would collect at a household hazardous waste event or at the collection site at the transfer station. We're not talking about things that you wouldn't find in an ordinary household, correct?
Yes, sir. Most of it is exactly what we might find. We're not picking up some of the other stuff that you might be worried about, I believe. It's the typical kind of thing. We might have some asbestos that comes in large chunks, or an old stove or something that had asbestos in it. But again, that's wrapped. Something else I might add, this is a temporary condition. I can't imagine we'll be there more than 2 months. Or 3, I really think will be less than that. We also have a solid waste authorization letter from DEQ. Let's see, I think that might get if you open for any other questions, of course.
Yes, Councilor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a few questions. Specifically, you're mentioning that's going to be common household products are normally found in our garage, but here we're going to be dealing with, I don't know how many stacks of it in one centralized location. You had mentioned that they're going to be sealed and also put in bags, but is that still putting us at risk of a potential, let's say, some major emergency happens and a potential inferno in this region? That's one question I had. Sorry, my kids are making noise. Another question I had is, you mentioned that there's going to be checks and monitoring of the air quality, but in what ways will that be checked? Will it be checked on a weekly basis? Like what standards are being set, considering it's going to be potentially near neighborhoods where people, residents, Salem residents are going to be breathing in this material if it goes high?
Yep. Thank you, Councilor. In the past, in our experience, I don't know if we've ever had a spill. That's not to say that one couldn't happen. If one were to happen, we had something punctured, again, we have several layers of plastic down on the ground. And so it's I think the risk, because it's already been packaged and put together and sealed up in bags and containers, and then comes and gets put in bigger ones, there's always a risk, I'm sure, right, of something spilling or breaking or puncturing. The air monitoring that we do is done daily. And so we'll have perimeter air monitors that look for dust-sized particles to see if we're losing anything. We'll look for background, what's already going through the air in that location, right? What's already in the air. So for instance, we'll be looking for volatile organic compounds. And I can tell you that, having done this for a long time, we'll find things that, like benzene in the air, because benzene, from all the traffic and the cars and trucks that are in the area alone, you would find some of that. When oftentimes we sample before we get there and we sample after we get there to make sure that we left it in as good a shape as we found it. If we find that there has been a spill, we clean it up. So air monitoring is done daily. For COVID, we also have, again, we follow those protocols, social distancing, masking. We have people walking around during the day and wiping everything down multiple times during the day. But we just haven't had a problem, at least with our recent experience over several years, and with the fires in California. Is there risk? Yes, there's always some risk, right?
You have a robust notification system. I mean, you can see where the residents you're actually a couple blocks away from the backyard of residences, but do you have a fairly robust notification system or plan? Is that in place, that if anything happens, there's a quick notification to those folks?
Yeah, well, I'll have to make sure that is defined. Normally, we would make quick notifications to myself, to the city, to the fairgrounds, and also with the fire marshal's office and 911. So I've already been working or talking to at least chief, your deputy chief of operations for Salem Fire Hazmat, Reed Godfrey. We work together a lot. So we will make sure that a plan like that's in place and send that to you for your staff review. We've already sent them several of our SOPs as well. And one other thing I want to stress, I haven't said it here, but it has come up at our other staging area down in Central Point near Medford, and that is, this is not to be a transfer area for people to come drop their stuff off.
Right.
We do not want that. We don't want the traffic associated with that. We are not going to be able to handle that. This is already stuff already is done in the field and brought in, and we want to make that clear to the public. We'll have fact sheets and that are already being developed. And then if it helps, what we've done in Medford is I brought down community involvement coordinators who are off in the face of EPA to go visit with the community, be as transparent as possible, and let them know what we're doing.
And you'll have security at the site. I mean, there'll be...
Yes, sir. We'll have 24 hours. We'll have security overnight. Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Councilor Nanke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And having 30 to 40 years of hazardous materials management and hazardous waste management experience, it sounds like what, to put it more in layman's term, is what's going to happen. They're going to go out, collect materials. Where they pick it up, they will segregate it based on material type to ensure compatibility.
Yes.
So we have to worry about weird chemical reactions. If there's a container that's questionable, it will be overpacked. All of this material will then be moved down to the fairgrounds, where they will then maneuver it into more bulk packaging. But they need to get it out of the field, and then this location would be used to prep it for shipment to its final hazardous waste destination at a licensed treatment, storage, and disposal facility. Is that correct estimation?
That's exactly right. You said it way more succinctly and better than I could. That's exactly right, Councilor.
The other thing, I think the bottom line for all of us is it is not going to be entering our water supply, because they're getting it out of the canyon and away from leaching into the North Santiam or any of its tributaries. So, Councilor Hoy, are you ready to make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I move City Council adopt Resolution 2020-48 declaring a state of emergency related to the Santiam Canyon wildfire response.
Second.
By Nanke. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we'll call a roll.
I think Councilor Leung has her hand up.
Oh, there you are. I'm sorry.
Thank you,
What's
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I still don't feel good about this decision.
Okay.
I mean, my concern again, I mean, there was mention by Mr. Franklin earlier about there's no guarantee of like a potential leak, which of course it's pretty much you can't guarantee some of those things from happening in the first place. But my concern would be we're not having community input here, that we're potentially exposing our community to hazardous chemicals that, if in a worst case scenario something happened, I understand that it's supposed to be a temporary location to move things and then moved again until it's moved to its final destination. But I have some I'm just really concerned about this from a public health perspective.
Okay, let's call a roll.
Councilor Ossick?
Aye.
Councilor Hoy?
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser?
Aye.
Councilor Andersen?
Aye.
Councilor Nanke?
Aye.
Councilor Leung?
Nay.
Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
yeah, perhaps you'll keep us updated through the city manager, or even come back, either of you, and talk to us again on how it's going. We're very interested in this relative to the water system. So good luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, councilors.
Okay, so we are at 3.38, Councilor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I wanted to pull it because I just had a few questions I wanted to ask.
Would you make does that need a motion?
Yep.
Yeah, why don't you give me the motion now?
What's the terminology?
I'm sorry.
Staff recommendation.
Staff, yeah, staff.
Okay, thank you. I moved staff recommendation.
There
Sorry.
we go, thanks. I'm sorry.
Second.
Second, who seconded? Hoy? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Leung.
Thank you so much. So I was reading through this and I understand that we're going to be expanding the park ranger role, which I'm happy to see so the individual will be working instead of at just 4 parks, will be potentially going to all the different parks. So I guess my question is, it centers on one part that the report was talking about on community engagement. Specifically educational programs teaching children and adults alike. Because of COVID, has that continued or is it starting up again?
Yes, you want me to answer?
Go ahead, please. Just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Reynolds. I'm the code compliance supervisor. Believe it or not, we have actually managed to have COVID safe junior ranger camp. The junior ranger camp, believe it or not, was held with noodles, pool noodles, so that all the kids had to each stay a pool noodle apart, which actually put them at like 12 feet apart. They all were masked and washed their hands and got to participate in all these outdoor events and still were at COVID distance. We also have an owl prowl coming up at the end of the month. That is going to have, I believe right now we have 2 full families and then 2 individual children that are going to go out and get to sneak around in the park at night to see owls, hopefully, and observe their scat and the things that they eat. So that's still going to happen, all COVID safe.
Okay, great. And I guess the other question was, I did read in the report that it's late, obviously. Citations. It said that he could issue citations. What kind of citations is he allowed to? Are they allowed to issue?
Want me to get this too, Norm?
Yes, please.
Suzanne again. Currently, because he's only been allotted to the original codes that were approved by council, the only citations he's been writing or been able to write is for smoking or general littering. He has not actually had to issue too many because that's another part of his education. He speaks to everybody every day and educates them on why and how it's offending other people. And he generally doesn't have to do that. And that's how we'd like it.
Okay, those are my only questions.
Thank you.
Other questions? We'll call the roll.
Councilor Hoy?
Aye.
Councilor Nordyke?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser?
Aye.
Councilor Andersen?
Aye.
Councilor Nanke?
Aye.
Councilor Leung?
Aye.
Councilor Ossick?
Aye.
Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Motion passes. 3.3B, Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I move staff recommendation, which is to authorize the city manager to execute the grant agreement in the amount of $55,000 with the Continuum of Care Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance to fund costs associated with providing supportive services to Salem's chronically homeless population.
Second.
Second by Andersen.
Thank you. So the reason I pulled it, and I will be brief since this has been quite an extensive meeting already, and I understand people's desire to complete our agenda, but I want to point out what an important milestone that I think that this reflects. The Statesman Journal reported back in December 2019 a huge disparity in federal funding for homelessness in our city compared to our city down the road, Eugene. The Statesman Journal reported that Lane County received more than $3 million for that particular year from the federal government to fight homelessness. But Marion and Polk counties combined got less than $700,000. And that is because Lane County had its own continuum of care, which is a continuum that is all about funding homelessness services. And when you do the math that the Statesman Journal provided in their article, they reported that Lane County secured about $2,400 per homeless person in the year 2016. But in that exact same year, Marion and Polk County got $550 per person. The reason being is that for years, we were a part of the rural Oregon continuum of care, meaning that Marion County and Polk County were lumped in with several other counties in rural Oregon. Now, I've traveled around the state, and I can tell you that most people don't consider Salem or Marion County to be rural. And I know that our crisis here for homelessness is very real indeed. And what we have done since then is finally break away from that. So back in December of last year, and raise your hand if that feels like a million years ago, but in any event, December of last year, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development approved plans for Marion and Polk County to form its own continuum of care, which means that we can now secure more federal homelessness dollars. My peers and I have said this before. The city of Salem cannot fix homelessness by itself. We have to rely on resources from the county, the state, and the feds if we want to end homelessness in this city. And I'm really proud of the fact that our community partners and our city staff have worked so hard on creating this continuum of care of our own so that we can receive the level of funding that makes sense for a county with our population size. So what we're looking at tonight is just a simple piece of the puzzle here. We're looking at a grant that will allow us to take the funds that groups like Mountain West and others have already started donating to allow us to basically fuel our end of homelessness, to start working together towards ending homelessness and reducing homelessness in our city. So I just want folks to take a moment and realize that we are making important strides and making up for years where federal dollars were left on the table. And so in order to do that, we need to create a grant agreement to authorize this payment of funds that is basically donations from Salem Health and, as I mentioned, Mountain West, so that we can take that money and put it into the fund that is appropriate for the continuum of care. So I'll be voting to support the motion, obviously, but I wanted to make sure that folks understood where we are at as a moment of time. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Nordyke. Those of us who've worked on this over the years are really pleased that we've gotten this far, that we continue on this road. That was one of the real revelations, was the situation in the continuum of care. And I really want to thank Councilor Hoy for the work he's been doing in that area as well. Okay, I guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor? Say so to the report. Yeah.
Councilor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser.
Aye.
Councilor Andersen.
Aye.
Councilor Nanke.
In order now, aye.
Councilor Leung.
Aye.
Councilor Ossick.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye, motion passes. Okay, we go to information reports. Anything catch your fancy? Go to first readings then.
Ordinance Bill number 1220, an ordinance relating to historic preservation, amending SRC 230.005, .018, .020, .025, .030, .040, .045, .050, .056, .057, .058, .060, .063, .064, .065, .075, .082, .090, .100, 300, .100, .420, .520, .620, repealing and replacing SRC 230.085, renumbering SRC 230.100, 230.101 and 110, and creating new provisions 230.036.084.095.105.110 and SRC Chapter 231.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move City Council conduct first reading of ordinance bill number 12-20, amending the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan to include an update of the city's historic preservation plan, an update SRC Chapter 230, historic preservation, and other identified chapters of the city's Unified Development Code addressing historic preservation, and advance the ordinance bill to second reading for enactment.
Righty, any discussion? Okay, if you call the roll.
Second. We need a
Second.
Oh, thank you. Now, anyone want to talk? Okay, if you call the roll.
Councilor Kaiser?
Aye.
Councilor Andersen?
Aye.
Councilor Nanke?
Aye.
Councilor Leung?
Aye.
Councilor Ossick?
Aye.
Councilor Hoy?
Aye.
Councilor Nordijk?
Aye.
Councilor Lewis?
Aye.
Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Okay. Second reading. Now let's go to our second reading.
Ordinance Bill number 1120, an ordinance relating to amending the Stormwater Master Plan, a component of the Salem Comprehensive Plan, and amending the Salem Revised Code 64.005. Councilor Andersen.
Aye.
Councilor Nanke.
Aye.
Councilor Leung.
Aye.
Councilor Ossick.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordijk.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Kaiser.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Passes. Don't see anything else. Anything for good of the order, then we can go home. We are adjourned. Well, you are home.
Have a great night, everybody.
You too.